Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku was saved by Nejire instead of All Might? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Izuku Midoriya had always thought the world was full of amazing things, but they were always just out of his reach. Izuku was one of the unlucky few who were diagnosed as quirkless in a time when 80% of people had superpowers called quirks. He was at the tender age of 4, his legs swinging back and forth on the paper-covered examination table, crinkling with every fidget. His All Might action figure was clutched so tightly in his small fist that the hard plastic cape dug into his palm. He remembered the X-rays clipped to the lightbox, the undeniable proof of his defectiveness. The doctor tapped the film with a pen. He pointed to the extra joint in the pinky toe, a biological redundancy that had marked him as a reminder of a time when people were weaker, slower, and more fragile. He remembered how bored and clinical the doctor sounded when he told a child they would have a life of irrelevance. He spoke of evolution as if it were a cruel god and Izuku were a glitch in humanity's software, something to be patched out, ignored, and forgotten. There was no sympathy in the man's eyes, only the dull fatigue of a bureaucrat processing a filing error. He remembered the car ride home, the silence so thick it felt like a physical chokehold. The windshield wipers slashed back and forth, counting down the seconds of his new life. The rain drummed against the window, erratic and angry, matching the rhythm of his breaking heart. But mostly he remembered the tears. Not his own, he had been too shocked to cry then, frozen in a state of hollow disbelief, but his mother's. He remembered sitting in front of the computer later that night, the blue glow of the monitor illuminating his dark room like a spotlight on a tragedy. On the screen, All Might laughed, fearless and strong, carrying people out of the fiery debris of a disaster zone, 100 lives safe in his massive arms. "I am here." Izuku remembered turning to his mother, pointing at the screen with a trembling finger, his voice just a whisper, breaking under the weight of his desperate hope. "Mom, can I be a hero too?" He didn't want an apology. He didn't want pity. He didn't want a hug. Just, "You can. It will be hard, but you can." That's all that he wanted her to say. But she didn't. She had collapsed to her knees, hugging him so tightly it hurt, her tears soaking his favorite All Might shirt. She had apologized, over and over. "I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry." That was the first crack in the foundation. The realization that even the person who loved him most in the world didn't have faith in him. If his own mother, the woman who kissed his forehead and bandaged his scrapes, couldn't see a hero in him, who could? Her apology made him feel worthless. She wasn't crying because she thought the world was unfair, she was crying because she thought the doctor was right. From that day forward, his life became a relentless gauntlet of isolation and ridicule. In kindergarten, the other children flaunted their budding abilities, tiny flames flickering from fingertips, objects levitating at will, and bodies stretching like rubber. Izuku sat on the sidelines, his wide green eyes filled with awe and envy. "Hey Deku, you're useless without a quirk. You're worse than the rejects. You're nothing." Katsuki Bakugo, or Kaken, his childhood friend-turned-bully, would sneer and make small explosions in his hands as he ruled the playground. They used to be friends when they were young, and his quirk hadn't yet appeared. Back then, they played together on a leveled field. They had chased ball in the park, scraped their knees on the same asphalt, and dreamed of being the best hero duo the world had ever seen. The dynamic shifted the moment Kaken's hands began to pop with the sweet, sickly smell of nitroglycerin, while Izuku remained stubbornly ordinary. The order of things was made. Kaken was a star, a supernova prodigy whom teachers, parents, and friends praised. He got a big head because he lived in a culture that valued power above all else. And what about Izuku? Izuku was the rock in the way. Not a problem, since a problem is something complicated. He was just there. Not worth paying attention to. Beneath contempt. A background character in Kaken's origin story. The bullying wasn't just physical, though the burns on Izuku's shoulders and the bruises on his ribs were real enough. It was psychological. It was the way Kaken looked at him, not always with hatred, but often with genuine confusion and disgust, that Izuku even dared to exist in the same space as him, as if Izuku's very presence was an insult to the concept of strength. Don't you get it? You don't have a quirk. You're barely even human in this society. You're a liability. A waste of space. Kaken had said earlier that day, smoke curling from his palms as he cornered Izuku against the chalkboard with his lackeys behind him, snickering. The words burned hotter than the explosions. Liability. Useless. The nickname, Deku, a play on Dekunibu, meaning useless, stuck like glue. It wasn't just a nickname anymore, it was his identity. It was the label the world had slapped onto his forehead, a constant reminder of his inadequacy. Teachers looked the other way, and society whispered that the quirkless were unfit for a world of heroes and villains. Yet, Izuku's spirit refused to break entirely. He poured his heart into notebooks, scribbling detailed analyses of every hero he admired. All Might, the symbol of peace, was his idol, a beacon of hope with his unbreakable smile and overwhelming strength. Izuku would whisper to himself, clutching his latest volume of his hero analysis notebooks, #one day, I'll save people too. I'll be a hero, quirk or no quirk. That fragile dream was shattered when, after school, he was rescued from a villainous sludge monster by All Might himself. The world's greatest hero, the man whose smile had been the only thing keeping Izuku's dream on life support for 10 agonizing years, had stood right before him. In desperation to ask him a question, Izuku accidentally clutched onto his idol's leg just as he decided to take off into the air, taking the boy with him for a flight. He had ignored the vertigo, ignored the fear of death as they soared through the air, to ask that one question. The question he needed someone to answer was different from his mother's, Kaken's, or the doctor's. He required the pillar of justice of this superhuman society to tell him he belonged. Once they safely landed on the roof of a nondescript commercial building in Mizudafu, the hero unintentionally revealed his real form, a gaunt, skeletal man, eyes sunken and shadowed like a skull, blood trickling from his mouth as an undisclosed injury ravaged his once mighty frame. Still, Izuku asked him, "Can a quirkless person become a hero like you?" All Might answered in a hollow rasp. "Young Midoriya, a quirkless person, can't become a hero." The words hit him like a Detroit smash to the gut. Pros are constantly risking their lives. I cannot simply say, you can become a hero even without power. I appreciate your spirit, but it's too dangerous. Without a quirk, you can't become a hero. You just get yourself killed or worse, drag others down with you. I'm sorry. He had tried to be kind. He had suggested police work, a noble profession, he said, but one where they were mocked for receiving villains captured by heroes. He had told Izuku to be realistic. Realistic. Izuku's world blurred, his knees buckling as All Might descended a rickety fire escape, leaving him on the rooftop. Minutes that felt like hours slipped by as his mind was far away, stuck on that single moment, replaying over and over, like a cruel movie jammed in an endless loop. For him, it was not just a rejection. It was a death sentence passed on the last dream he had left. The dream he'd clung to for 12 long years of bullying, ridicule, and loneliness. The words were heavy, absolute, spoken by the one person whose approval would have changed everything. Izuku let out a hollow, broken laugh that was snatched away by the wind. Reality was cruel. Reality was unfair. Reality was a genetic lottery in which he had pulled the only losing ticket in the box, while everyone else got superpowers. Reality was a boot stamping on a human face, forever. He said no, Izuku whispered, his voice cracking, barely audible over the distant hum of traffic. Even he said no. The notebook number 13 hero analysis for the future lay on the cold concrete near the stairwell door where All Might had dropped it. It was charred and wet, ruined by Kaken's explosion earlier that day and the koi pond it had been thrown into. The cover was warped, the pages swollen with water, looking like the bloated corpse of his dreams. Izuku walked over to the notebook, his legs feeling heavy, as if filled with lead. He knelt and picked it up, his fingers tracing the scorched edges where the paper had turned to ash. Hero analysis for the future? What future? The wind whipped through his messy green hair, tugging and tearing at his Aldra Middle School uniform like insistent fingers urging him forward. The city buzzed far below. Every breath he took, coming in shallow gasps as the weight of rejection pressed down, hurt. His shaking foot slipped once he caught himself by instinct. Instinct. The same instinct that always told him to help others. This time, it told him to let go. He looked at his hand. It was trembling uncontrollably, a vibration that traveled up his arm and into his chest. Izuku's heartbeat felt hollow in his tightened chest, as if it had forgotten how to be steady. The knuckles gripping the rusted guardrail were white and trembling. It was old, rusted in places, the metal flaking off under his touch. It barely reached his chest and was cold against his thigh, biting into his skin through the fabric of his trousers. A wind gust tousled his hair, cold against his feverish skin. Just one more step. The thought came unbidden, like a whisper from the darkness at the back of his mind. A whisper that had grown louder every hour since that meeting. Every minute. Every second. He stepped closer to the ledge and looked down. Tears slid down his freckled cheeks, off his chin, and vanished as he stared down at the pavement many stories below. The cars were just toys from up here, streaming red and white lights. The people were ants, rushing to their homes, their jobs, their lives. The world felt distant, detached, as if he were watching it through a thick pane of glass. The noise of the city, the sirens, the chatter, the hum of daily life faded into a dull roar, drowned out by the pounding of his own heart in his ears, blurring into a shadowy haze that stretched out like dark, welcoming arms. Each teardrop was a testament to shattered illusions. It wasn't high enough to seriously hurt a pro-hero. Maybe not even a student with a quirk. But him? It looked easy. Gravity was the one thing that didn't care if you had a quirk or not. It treated everyone the same. It didn't discriminate based on genetics or power levels. It was the only fair thing in the world. Izuku's breath hitched. He swallowed hard as Kaken's voice boomed in his mind. He had tried for so many years to convince himself that Kaken had been having a bad day. Or month. Or childhood. That he didn't mean any of it. After all, Kaken had been his first friend. His only friend. And still, the boy he had once admired had said the words that were now whispering again in Izuku's head. If you want to be a hero that badly, there's a quick way to do it. Believe that you'll be born with a quirk in the next life and take a swan dive off the roof of the building. What's the point? He murmured, his voice breaking. All those years. The notebooks, the dreams. For nothing? He thought about his mother. She was a kind woman, a ball of anxiety and love who fretted over his grades and cooked his favorite katsudon when he was sad. She had gained weight over the years, guilt eating at her just as much as it ate at him. I'm sorry that I'm not the son you wanted, Mom. If he did this, if he ended it, it would destroy her. Would it really destroy her? Or would she be relieved? Relieved that she didn't have to look at him with those sad, apologetic eyes anymore. Relieved that she didn't have to worry about her fragile, glass-boned son trying to play rough with gods and monsters. Relieved that she didn't have to whisper about him to the neighbors, explaining away his lack of power like a shameful family secret. She was constantly apologizing to him, crying for him. Her life was a vigil for a living ghost. Maybe if he were gone, she could finally smile. She could stop saying sorry and start living. And Kaken would be happy. He'd finally be free of the pebble in his path. The extra would be deleted from the scene. No more Deku looking down on him. No more annoying bug buzzing in his ear. But Izuku didn't need to worry. They'd move on eventually. Everyone did. Everyone had to. The world was built that way. No one would miss a quirkless nobody for long. Society had no place for the quirkless. Jobs were scarce, respect non-existent. He was a burden, a failure. The edge of the rooftop beckoned the drop below, a yawning abyss promising release. It's not so bad, just one step. And then the pain stops. The disappointment stops. The I'm sorry stop. You can finally rest, Izuku. Here he was, standing on the narrow concrete ledge on the wrong side of the railing. His heels hung over the empty air. The wind buffeted his back, pushing him, pressing against him like a hand, almost encouraging him to let go. To fly, just for a second. He closed his eyes. He could see the sludge villain from earlier that day. The suffocation. The feeling of slimy, foul-smelling fluid filling his lungs. The paralysis. The sheer terror of dying without leaving a mark. He hadn't been able to do anything. He hadn't saved anyone. He had just been a victim. A damsel in distress who was waiting for a hero, who looked at him with pity. Izuku took a deep, shuddering breath, filling his lungs with the smoggy city air one last time. He released his grip on the railing behind him. He let his arms fall to his sides, surrendering. Despair coiled tighter as he exhaled shakily. Just one more step. One more step and it would all be over. No more disappointment. No more pain. No more pitying looks. No more being told he wasn't enough. No more lying to mom about the bruises. No more Kaken's words cutting deeper every year. No more future he could never reach. He closed his eyes as his foot slid forward. Hey! Hey! A voice like chimes broke through, melodic, curious, and startlingly close. What are you doing that close to the edge? That seems dangerous, you know? Izuku flinched as if he had been shocked, and his breath caught in his throat. He turned his head, not enough to fully face the speaker, but just enough to see a girl floating in the air with bright, golden waves of energy curling around her blue skin-tight bodysuit and feet that looked like a whirlwind of living light. The energy pulsed, lighting up the roof in a warm, ethereal glow that produced a strange, oscillating hum. It sounded like a charged battery, like pure energy singing a high-pitched, resonant song. VVVVVVVM. She looked like a hero, but not one Izuku had seen before. Honestly, she looked like she belonged inside a book of myths. Her long, wavy hair floated around her like wings made of periwinkle blue silk that defied the wind. What really caught his attention were her wide eyes. Even though the girl was roughly 10 feet away, Izuku could see how curious, expressive, and impossibly bright they were, and also staring at him with something he didn't recognize at first. She was scared for him. She landed on the roof with a soft thump, waves of energy dispersing gently. Then she took a single step forward. People don't stand on edges like that. People who do that her voice broke. Just don't move. She raised her hands slowly, palms open, showing she meant no harm. Please. I want to talk to you. Izuku swallowed as the girl's eyes, wide and innocent, locked onto his red-rimmed from tears with an intensity that pinned him in place. I didn't think anyone was here, he choked as the world tilted. Why are you here? I was patrolling, she replied softly, still inching closer, slowly, like approaching the ledge might spook him. But you look like you could use a friend right now. Mind if I join you? The view up here is pretty amazing, huh? Who are you? He stammered, his voice barely audible over the wind. One foot shifted back from the ledge, but he didn't move away entirely. Despair still held him captive. I'm Nejire-chan, hero in training. What's your name? No pressures. Izuku's gaze darted between her and the drop below, his mind a whirlwind. A hero? But something in her voice genuine, without pity pierced the fog. Izuku hesitated, then took a small step back, though his body remained tense, ready to bolt or worse. I am Izuku. Midoriya, he whispered, unsure why he bothered to answer her. Well, Izuku, I don't know what's going on, but it looks like you're thinking something scary over there. Could you step back from the edge? Just a little? Or we can chat from here, whatever makes you comfortable. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't giving commands. She sounded warm. Nervous. Human. You shouldn't be here. Just leave me alone. Izuku's fingers tightened on the railing. I'm fine. You're standing on the ledge of a really tall building, she said with a small, shaky smile as she shook her head, her long blue hair swaying. That's not the usual spot for someone fine. Do you want to talk about it instead of looking down? She gestured to the space beside her invitingly, keeping her movements slow and predictable. Heroes don't walk away from someone who needs them. And right now? You look like you could use a listening ear. What's going on, Izuku? Why are you up here all by yourself? He closed his eyes. Just one more step. Please. I don't want to watch you fall. Something about the way she said that, like the thought physically hurt her, made a crack in the wall around his heart. The last of Izuku's resistance broke. Her voice warm, earnest, felt like the first sunlight after a lifetime of rain. Izuku's legs buckled slightly, but he stepped back. Just one step back. Nejire-chan hurried forward, wrapped her arms around his middle, and yanked him back hard. Izuku stumbled backward, falling onto the rooftop floor with a gasp as she landed partly on top of him. He could feel her trembling around him. The hug was immediate, instinctive, warm, so warm, she refused to let go. Izuku's lips parted, but no sound came out. He didn't know what to do. He had never been hugged like this by anyone except his mother. "You're okay," she whispered. "You're okay?" Izuku's hands hovered awkwardly before slowly clutching her, and the dam inside him broke. Something hot and humiliating built in his throat. Shame. Fear. Relief. So many things he couldn't categorize. He sobbed against her shoulder. It tore through him raw and ugly. "I'm sorry," he croaked. "I'm so stupid. I didn't mean for anyone to see." Nejire-chan didn't move away. She loosened her grip enough to kneel beside him, shifting so she could look at him with her beautiful blue eyes. "Do you want to die?" she asked quietly. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut, but tears came out anyway. "I don't want to die, I just don't want to be a burden." "A burden?" Her breath caught sharply. "To whom?" "Everyone." The words came out quickly now, tumbling out. "To Mom. To my teachers. To all of you who have to act like you don't feel sorry for me. To everyone who has to watch me fail and keep trying, even though it doesn't matter. To all the heroes in the world. He choked. To my childhood friend who said it would be better if I were dead." The last word slipped out without permission, and Nejire-chan's eyes widened not in pity but in anger. "Who said that to you?" Izuku shook his head violently. "It doesn't matter." "It matters," Nejire-chan insisted. "Because no one gets to say that to you. No one gets to decide your worth." Izuku laughed weakly, hopelessly. "I'm quirkless. Always have been. Everyone says I'm worthless, that I can't do anything. Even All Might. He told me today. A quirkless person can't be a hero. Can't save anyone. I've tried so hard. Notebooks full of analyses, dreaming every night. But it's all useless. I'm useless. What's the point of living in a world where I'm nothing?" Nejire-chan didn't hesitate as she leaned forward and hugged him. Not a startled, awkward hug, but a full-bodied, warm, human contact kind of hug, like she was trying to hold all the pieces of him together by herself. "You're worth something," she murmured into his shoulder. "You're worth a lot." Izuku finally broke down completely. Tears poured freely, sobs racking his frame, and he clung to her like a lifeline in stormy water, sobbing into her hero suit sleeve and trembling with every breath he tried to take. "It's okay," she whispered. "Let it out. You're safe." He didn't know how long they stayed like that. But eventually, when the storm inside him quieted enough for him to speak, he pulled back. "I'm sorry," he whispered again. "No being sorry." Nejire-chan shook her head. "Not for this." She held him tighter as he cried. She didn't ask him to stop crying. She didn't tell him to calm down. She just stayed solid, steady, a warm presence in a cold world. She stayed through the tears, through the trembling, through the words he could barely form. She listened. When his sobs finally tapered into shaky breaths, she guided him toward the stairwell door. "Come on, let's get you down from here, yeah? I'm taking you to Ryukyu's agency." Izuku blinked, the word registering sluggishly in his exhausted brain. "What?" "Ryukyu, the Dragoon hero. I'm her sidekick on top of being a student at UA. I'm a second year, soon to be third year, but I have a license to do patrols on my own. She's cool, she'll." Izuku stiffened, digging his heels into the concrete. His eyes darted around, panic flaring up again. "A pro-hero agency?" "No, I can't," he stammered, pulling his arm back slightly. "I'm nobody. I can't just walk into a pro-heroes agency looking like this. I'm a mess. And my mom. She'll be worried." I have to go home. If she finds out about this? He trailed off, the shame burning his cheeks. How could he explain that going to a hero agency felt like walking into a temple he had been excommunicated from? He was the quirkless kid who had just tried to jump. He didn't belong in Ryukyu's world. He would be a nuisance there too. Nejire-chan looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the fresh wave of anxiety washing away his brief relief. She didn't pull him. Instead, she stepped closer, invading his personal space with that same gentle warmth. "We'll call your mom," she promised firmly. "But I can't let you go home alone right now, Izuku. Not tonight." Her expression softened, the curiosity in her eyes replaced by a fierce protectiveness. "Because you need somewhere warm. Somewhere safe. And because if I don't, I'm terrified you'll leave here, and I'll never see you again." Izuku stared at her. There was no judgment in her voice. No disgust. Only fear and determination and something else. Something warm. She stood and extended her hand. "Izuku, come with me. Please. We'll figure this out together, okay? I'm here for you." His breath trembled. He looked at Nejire-chan's hand, not a fist ready to hit him, not a finger pointing out his flaws and open palm. Izuku didn't trust his voice, so he nodded. Then slowly he took her hand. She smiled softly, relieved as she helped him stand and led him downstairs, never loosening her grip on his hand. Gradually, the tension in Izuku's shoulders eased. The wind still howled, but it no longer felt like a beckoning force. Nejire-chan's warmth and her eccentric yet profound empathy chipped away at the despair. Izuku wasn't healed, far from it. But he was alive because someone cared enough to notice him. Someone bright. Someone kind. And for the first time in a long time, Izuku felt like maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't over yet. The rooftop, once a precipice of ending, became the start of something new, a lifeline extended by a blue-haired angel. Izuku's hand was small, cold, and shaking in Nejire-Heido's, like a bird that had been flying for too long. She didn't squeeze him hard enough to scare him, but hard enough to let him know she wasn't letting go. Not now. Maybe not ever. And though she did not show it for Izuku's sake, that moment on the roof was honestly the scariest moment of the teenage girl's life. After school and making sure she got a chance to say bye to Yuyu, Mirio, and Tamaki, Nejire quickly made her way to Ryukyu's agency to start her evening patrols. It was a beautiful evening, she might add. Once she finished clocking in and changing into her hero costume, she took to the streets. Wave motion propelled her effortlessly, her quirk converting vitality into powerful shockwaves, soaring through the air on spirals of vibrant energy. The sky was Nejire's ocean, vast and deep and endlessly inviting. Nejire swam through the air while the rest of the world was stuck on the ground, trying to get around the rigid grid of streets, stoplights, and crosswalks. It was the purest form of freedom. It was silent up here, the noise of the city, the honking horns, the shouting vendors, the rumble of trains was just a low-frequency hum that vibrated harmlessly as she spiraled over the rooftops and alleys, scanning for any sign of trouble. She embraced her heroic work with boundless enthusiasm. She hummed a tune she made up as she went along, keeping time with the pulsing beat of her wave motion. Golden spirals of energy twirled around her wrists and ankles, acting like thrusters to keep her floating against the pull of the earth. She felt like a jellyfish floating in a deep blue sea, not stinging anything, just gracefully being. The wind felt like a lover's caress, a reminder that she was alive and untethered. She would pass by some people, students on their way home from school and adults going to or from work. They would spot her long blue hair flowing like a banner behind her and instantly recognize Nejire-chan, the bubbly sidekick to the dragoon hero. She also got the occasional pervert who gawked at her bodysuit longer than she would have liked, but she ignored them. Still, the patrol had been slow today. Frustratingly so. Ryukyu had told her to do a final sweep of the commercial district before heading back to the agency. Keep your eyes open, Nejire-chan. Villains love the shadows. But don't push yourself too hard, okay? Nejire pirouetted in midair, her hair fanning out like a halo caught in the slipstream. She loved Ryukyu. She was strong, intelligent, and she turned into a dragon, which was objectively the coolest thing ever, but sometimes Nejire felt like the agency treated her a bit too much like a fragile fairy. Be careful. Watch your output. Don't exhaust yourself. They worried about her stamina, about the way her quirk drew directly from her own life force. They treated her abundant energy like a finite resource to be hoarded rather than a gift to be shared. She knew they meant well. Use too much, and she'd crash hard, sleeping for days. But she wanted to do more than conserve energy. She wanted to burn bright. She wanted to be a hero who made people smile just by showing up, as All Might did. She wanted to be the reason someone looked up at the sky and felt hope instead of fear. She banked left, drifting over a cluster of gray office buildings, giving the alleyways and rooftops one last check out of habit rather than expectation. That's when she saw him, and her stomach plummeted. He was a smudge of darkness against the sky, a small, lonely figure standing on the wrong side of a rusted safety railing. Nejire's humming cut off instantly. The melody died in her throat. The air in her lungs turned to ice. They taught her the protocols for if or when she saw jumpers in UA training simulations. Assess the situation. Call for backup. Do not engage aggressively. Maintain distance until a negotiator arrives. But the simulations were just actors with scripted scenarios and safe outcomes. This was real. This was a boy, probably no older than her, maybe younger, judging by the curve of his shoulders, standing high atop a building on a ledge scarcely wider than his foot, his posture screaming despair. He was leaning forward, his body a rigid line of tension, defying the wind that tried to push him back. Oh no. Nejire didn't think. She didn't radio Ryukyu. She didn't calculate the wind shear or check her stamina reserves. She just moved. Her heart pounded so fast that it threatened to explode out of her chest. Without hesitation, she adjusted her trajectory, subtly channeling her quirk to ascend quietly, careful not to startle him. Touching down on the rooftop a safe distance away, she prepared to intervene. Seeing the green-haired, freckled boy trembling as he stood perilously close to the edge, his back to her, shoulders hunched in defeat. Nejire's mind raced. She trained for villains, rescues, and disasters, but this was raw, human fragility. One wrong word, one sudden move, and he might tip over into the abyss. If that happened, I don't think I'd ever be able to sleep at night again. I may have given up being a hero altogether. But by some miracle, the wind that howled around them, carrying the distant hum of city life below, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding high above, quieted as Nejire took a steadying breath, forcing her usual bubbly energy into something softer, more anchoring a part of her she rarely showed anyone, even her closest friends. She knew what it was like to be overwhelmed. Too many expectations. Too much pressure. Too many people who only cared about her quirk and not about her. When she was younger, adults praised her power but complained about her curiosity. You talk too much. You ask too many questions. You're exhausting. She learned to hide the parts of herself that weren't light enough. But she was able to push it all to the back of her mind and focus on making a connection. No heroics here, no flashy saves or powerful blasts. Just a connection. And I thank God that it worked. They slowly walked down the stairwell, their footsteps echoing softly. Izuku kept rubbing at his eyes, wiping away the last of the tears that kept threatening to fall again. But every time he stifled a shaky breath, Nejire would give his hand a light squeeze, and the shaky breath turned into something steadier. I'm here, it's okay. She and Izuku reached the first floor, passing flickering hallway lights, until they stepped out into an alley. My agency's not far. They've got this cozy lounge with the best hot chocolate. Trust me, it'll help, Nejire said softly. Her blue hair caught the light from the street lamp like a wave. Izuku nodded without thinking, too tired to say anything. They walked in silence for a few blocks. Nejire would look at him with those big, curious eyes that looked like they were trying to see right through him. Eventually, exhaustion, both physical and mental, caught up with him as he fell asleep while walking, but Nejire caught him before he hit the sidewalk. She didn't protest, carrying him the rest of the way. Hey, Izuku. Izuku slowly stirred, waking to realize they had arrived at the Ryukyu agency, A sleek building with dark glass windows and dragon motifs etched into its glass doors. The feature that stood out the most was a billboard with Ryukyu advertising her clothing line, Dragwar. Izuku didn't remember dozing off. It felt like only a couple of minutes, not the whole way there. Nejire-chan held him close. So close that he noticed the scent of her shampoo, lemongrass, and something floral, maybe jasmine. It was comforting. He could feel her hair softly brushing against his cheek, the faint warmth of her breath. She must have had to carry him the entire time. "I'm sorry," Izuku stammered, his voice still raspy, sounding like dry leaves scraping together. "Stop apologizing," Nejire-chan whispered, pulling back only enough to study Izuku's face and brushing his hair from his forehead. "Are you feeling dizzy?" He nodded weakly. "Everything seems so far away. And loud. And quiet. I don't know." "That's fine." She put her forehead softly against his. "It's okay to feel strange. But you can do this. Step at a time. Okay?" Nejire-chan was the first to walk into the agency, and Izuku followed her half a step behind, shoulders hunched and holding his notebook to his chest like a shield. His notebook, which was old and worn out, with dog-eared pages and smudged graphite, shook in his hand. He didn't know how tightly he was holding it until his knuckles hurt. Nejire led him further inside to the brightly lit lobby and to the reception desk, which was run by a woman with light blue skin and shoulder-length dark blue hair, wearing an outfit that could be described, in the simplest terms, as a CC rescue diver's suit. Her name was displayed on the plaque on the left-hand side of the desk, Mizudeba Awada. "Heido?" she asked, noticing Nejire-chan right away. "You're back early, en?" Her gaze turned to Izuku, then back to Nejire. "Heido, who is?" "I know I'm on the clock, Aqua Woman," Nejire-chan apologized. "But we need access to the lounge and the cafe. Please." The blue-skinned woman looked back at Izuku, her expression softening into sympathy, then sighed. "Go ahead, but I'll have to let Ryukyu know you're here and with a guest." Nejire-chan nodded. "Thank you." Awada waved them through as Nejire-chan led Izuku further into the building. The lounge was exactly as Nejire-chan described, warm and safe. The interior was spacious and predominated in red. The design style and decoration were distinctly Chinese, featuring columns adorned with golden Chinese dragons, statues of guardian lions, and other decorative elements. There were office tables for paperwork, several shelves between some of the columns, and a plasma TV mounted on the wall. The cafe area, on the other hand, felt more like a very fancy living room with soft couches, low tables, and a self-serve station with drinks and snacks. The aroma of coffee beans roasting filled the room, and the flickering vanilla-scented candles on the side tables somehow helped slow the frantic, rabbit-kick rhythm of Izuku's heart. This room was clearly meant for clients waiting out paperwork or recovering from minor incidents. Tonight, Nejire-chan made it his sanctuary. Not in a million years would Izuku have guessed that the headquarters of a top 10 hero would be so cozy. Nejire-chan sat him on a plush, velvet sofa that was definitely too expensive for anyone like him to afford as she busied herself making 2 mugs of cocoa. She returned a while later, having changed out of her costume into a loose, oversized pastel hoodie that swallowed her frame. It made her look smaller, less like a powerhouse hero and more like a typical teenager. She was carrying a tray with 2 ceramic mugs, steam curling from them, and a plate of sugar cookies, and she placed it on the low mahogany table in front of him. One mug was plain, the other was piled high with marshmallows that bobbed like little clouds. "Careful, it's hot," Nejire-chan chirped as she handed Izuku the cocoa with marshmallows. "I gave you the extra fluffy ones." It was too much for Izuku's liking, but he didn't want to appear rude. The ceramic was thick and warm, radiating heat into his palms. "It's the special agency blend. Double chocolate with a pinch of chili powder. Guaranteed to fight off the Dementors." Izuku blinked. The pop culture reference didn't register. Dementors? You know, the soul-sking things from those wizard books? Nejire-chan sat beside him, legs swinging as she stayed too close, some might say, but Izuku didn't want her to move even a millimeter away. Sadness is kind of like that. It makes everything cold and gray. So, hot chocolate. It's scientifically proven to help. Think. Or maybe I like hot chocolate. But not as much as jasmine tea. Wait, is tea more your thing? I should have asked. Izuku took a sip. The sweetness hit his tongue first, followed by the rich, dark bitterness of the cocoa and a sudden, surprising kick of heat from the chili powder. It bloomed in his chest, thawing the ice that had settled there since All Might's rejection. Thank you, Nejire-chan, he whispered. Just Nejire, she corrected with a bright smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. You can call me just Nejire. Or Hato, if you want to be formal, but Nejire is fine. Wait. Izuku tilted his head. Your hero name is also your real name? She giggled lightly. It's actually a funny story. And you don't have to thank me. I just did what anyone would do. Anyway, drink up. If you want to talk more, I'm here. No rush. Izuku looked down at the dark liquid, watching his own reflection ripple. Most people would have walked past or recorded it on their phones. Or told me to go ahead and jump. So, that notebook you were holding onto really tight. Nejire began as she leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand, her blue eyes locking onto hero analysis for the future number 13 lying on the table. It was still wet, smelling faintly of pond water and burnt paper. Is it a diary? Izuku stiffened, his shoulders hiking up to his ears. There I go, being nosy. Just who I am. Sorry. Izuku knew she didn't mean anything by it, she was trying to lift his mood. Still, his instinct to hide kicked in. It's nothing. Just garbage. Literally. It didn't look like garbage, Nejire pressed gently, her voice losing its teasing edge. It looked like something important. Something you worked hard on. Can I see? Izuku hesitated. The ghost of Kaken's explosion still lingered on the cover. Every time he showed someone his notebooks, the reaction was the same. Creep. Stalker. Nerd. Otaku. Disgusting. But Nejire had saved his life. She had held him while he cried, probably getting snot all over her costume, probably explaining the change of clothes, and had brought him into her sanctuary and given him hot cocoa. Denying her seemed ungrateful, almost cruel. With trembling fingers, he reached for the soggy, charred remains of the notebook, the title barely legible beneath the black scorch marks left by the explosion that had warped the cardboard. Nejire picked it up carefully, treating the ruined pages with a reverence that made Izuku's chest ache. She didn't grimace at the smell or the dampness. She flipped it open to a random page, the wet paper tearing slightly. Oops. Sorry. Then she gasped. Whoa. Izuku flinched, curling in on himself, waiting for the mockery. You drew this. She pointed to a sketch of a milady in mid-kick. The perspective is amazing. You really captured the motion. Wait, what's all this writing? As she read, her eyebrows climbed higher and higher toward her hairline. Gigantification involves the square cube law. Mass increases faster than surface area. Her joints take immense strain, specifically the patellar tendons. If she focuses her growth on increasing her density shifting while maintaining a smaller size, she could increase her impact force by 300% without the collateral damage risk of full gigantification in urban environments. She needs a high caloric intake immediately post-battle to prevent muscle atrophy. Current fighting style is too reliant on intimidation. Against a piercing-type quirk, her size makes her a target, not a tank. Density shifting? Nejire read aloud, stumbling slightly over the technical jargon. I thought her quirk was just gigantification. I didn't know she could do that. She can, Izuku said, and the words came out before he could stop them. His analytical mind took over his nerves. This morning, I saw her fight the purse snatcher for the first time. Not only did she get big when she attacked the bad guy, but she also got heavy. The streets broke under her heel before she even got to her full 20 meters. It implies mass manipulation, not just size expansion. Most people think she's just a giant. If she learned to control her density independently of her volume, she could be a powerhouse in tight corridors where she usually can't fit. She wouldn't be a liability in downtown areas anymore. He slapped a hand over his mouth, his face burning hot enough to steam the glasses he wasn't wearing. Sorry. I'm muttering. It's creepy. I know. I talk too much. Nejire stared at him, her mouth slightly open. Then a slow, wide grin spread across her face, bright enough to light up the room. Creepy. She laughed, a bright, chiming sound that chased the shadows into the corners. Izuku, that's not creepy. That's genius. You just solved her biggest problem with math. Oh, and I can totally relate to that whole high caloric intake thing. Izuku blinked, looking at her with some concern. What do you mean? See, my quirk drains so much energy it's like running a marathon, multiple times in a row, non-stop. I need like 5,000 calories per meal to keep up. If I don't, I'll be all wobbly and poof, no more spirals. She demonstrated by wiggling her fingers in a mock-exhausted wave. Izuku nodded slowly. You're saying your quirk converts your vitality into kinetic energy blasts. So, high caloric intake compensates for the metabolic drain. That makes sense, kind of like how Fat Gum stores fat for his quirk, but in reverse. Yeah. Nejire beamed. And on the upside, I can eat whatever I want and not gain any weight. And if I do, Yu says it goes in all the right places. Whatever that means. She tilted her head innocently. Oh, Yu's my friend from UA, by the way. Izuku felt his brain short-circuit and his face heat up. He knew exactly what her friend meant. He wasn't purposefully trying to think about it, but the way her figure filled out her costume. I mean, that's great for hero work, mobility and all that. Nejire blinked at him, her big eyes widening in curiosity. Izuku? Why is your face all tomato-y? Oh, the chili powder must have kicked in, right? I knew I added too much. I'm so sorry. It's okay, really, Izuku reassured her. Honestly, this was the best cup of hot cocoa I've ever had. But he looked at her. Why are you doing this for me? Why are you being so nice to me? You don't even know me. Nejire dropped the cheerful facade. People tell me that I'm an airhead a lot, she said, her voice lower, more grounded, losing its sing-song quality. They say, oh, Nejire is so cute, or Nejire has such a flashy quirk. They think that because I smile and ask questions, I don't understand things. They think I'm just a pretty face. A mascot. She looked back at him. It hurts, you know? To be seen as just one thing. To be reduced to a label. The cute one. The airhead. It makes you feel small. It makes you feel like no matter how hard you scream, no one hears you. They hear what they expect to hear. Izuku stared at her, confused. But you're amazing. You have a quirk. You can fly and fight villains. Izuku stopped himself before he could call her an angel. Which she is. But it felt excessively sappy. I can't do any of that. How could anyone think you're not amazing? Nejire smiled, but it was a sad, small thing that didn't reach her eyes. I'm not special. I'm just a girl who also gets tired, and not because wave motion drains my stamina like crazy. I have days when I can't get out of bed. I have days when I feel like I'm not strong enough. But do you know why I want to be a hero? Izuku slowly shook his head, mesmerized by her honesty. Because heroes don't just fight villains, Nejire said, leaning forward, which made him flinch, but he didn't pull away. Villains are easy. You punch them and they fall. Simple. But sadness? Despair? That feeling like you're drowning even when you're standing on a roof? That's the real enemy. That's the hardest villain to beat. Izuku was at a loss for words. You're really kind. He knew he was stating the obvious, but it was worth saying. Nejire shifted closer. Hey, Izuku? You're shaking again. Do you need more cocoa? Or water? Or a blanket? Ryukyu keeps warm ones for stakeouts, you'd like. Speaking of, a calm, authoritative voice cut through the air like a blade. Izuku froze and looked behind him to see the dragoon hero herself, Ryukyu. Japan's 9th-ranked pro hero approached the teenagers quietly, her footsteps muffled on the carpeted floor, her presence commanding attention. Granted, Izuku had seen her on TV, in magazines, and on billboards like the one outside, but meeting her in person was completely different. She was a tall woman with chin-length blonde hair and calm, gold, slit-pupiled eyes, wearing a dark red, traditional qipao that accentuated her regal posture, radiating strength that somehow made her look even more imposing than her dragon form. Nejire, she said, her voice calm but edged with concern. Aquawoman informed me that you brought a civilian, a student, here without informing me first. And you didn't check in during patrol. I was worried. Nejire jumped up, undeterred, and bowed her head apologetically. Sorry, Ryukyu. The pro-hero scanned the room with the precision of a predator until she noticed the cocoa, the cookies, the notebook, and finally, Izuku himself. He expected her to demand to know why a civilian teenager was here at her agency, drinking her cocoa before telling him to get out. But she didn't. Her gaze softened instantly when she saw him. She just looked at his red-rimmed eyes, his disheveled uniform, the way he was curling in on himself, trying to take up as little space as possible, and she understood enough. What happened? Ryukyu asked. Well, this is Izuku. He had an awful day. Like, the worst day. I don't want to bother, Izuku said, staring at his shoes, feeling ashamed that his actions may get Nejire in trouble. I should go. Get home to Mom before. Izuku suddenly blinked, startled as he checked his pockets, then pulled out his phone. His stomach twisted as he looked at the screen. 7:42 p.m. 2 missed calls from Mom. 1 voice message from Mom. Oh crap. His voice rose, panicked. I was supposed to be home by now. My mom. She's going to be so scared. She's probably freaking out. I didn't come home. I didn't even text. Nejire placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Hey, it's okay. We'll let her know. Ryukyu's got it. Right, Ryukyu? Nejire, I need to have a word with you in my office, Ryukyu said, voice softening like a dragon's rumble tamed, before returning her attention to Izuku. Young man, you're safe here. Finish your cocoa. Is Nejire in trouble? He asked. No, but I do need to speak with her in private. But first, your mother. Ryukyu had already pulled out her phone. May I have her number? Izuku nodded aggressively and provided it to her as calmly as he could. Ryukyu made the call. 1 anxious half-hour later. Izuku! Mom cried, bursting through the agency's doors like a whirlwind of maternal frenzy, hurrying past the reception desk, into the cafe, and to her son. She nearly collided with him on the sofa, crushing him in a hug as tears ran down her cheeks. Izuku gasped. Air. She loosened her hold but refused to let go entirely, sobbing hysterically. Izuku, I was so worried. You didn't come home and... Her voice cracked, her hands clutched at his uniform, checking for broken bones, checking for life. You're always home by 5:30. But why didn't you come home? Why didn't you call? I called the school. I called the police. When Ms. Ryukyu called about you. Oh my god, Izuku. I was afraid something terrible had happened. I thought. Izuku looked down, feeling shame flooding through him. Her eyes were red and swollen, her hair a disheveled mess, her cardigan buttoned wrong. She looked smaller than he remembered, frilier. Mom, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Izuku cried, clinging to her, rocking her back and forth. But I'm okay. I'm here. Ryukyu and Nejire re-entered the cafe quietly, waiting for the initial wave of emotion to pass before approaching the mother and son. Nejire wiped her eyes discreetly, pretending she wasn't crying too. Not that Izuku could blame her. When the sobs subsided to sniffles, Ryukyu stepped forward. Mrs. Midoriya. But before she could speak, Mom turned around and took hold of the Dragoon hero's hands, bowing her head. Thank you, she said, voice still trembling. Thank you for finding my son. Ryukyu shook her head. It was Nejire who found him. Her timing made all the difference. Nejire blushed, rubbing the back of her neck. I'm just happy he's okay, Mrs. Midoriya. Then her bright face shifted to a worried look. But we need to tell you something. Izuku's blood ran cold. How do you explain something to someone who loves you so completely? How do you admit something that feels like a scar carved into the soul? But Nejire's right, she deserves to know the truth. Ryukyu gestured for Mom to sit with Izuku and nodded for Nejire to continue. What followed was the most challenging conversation of Izuku's life. They didn't say, suicide attempt. Explicitly the word was too heavy, too sharp for the fragile woman trembling on the sofa, but they didn't have to. The context was screaming as Nejire helped explain in simple, careful words what she saw on that rooftop, what Izuku had been about to do, how she pulled him back, how he broke down afterward. Mom went pale, the color draining from her face until she looked like a ghost. She looked at Izuku, really looked at him, and saw the hollowness in his eyes that she had been trying to ignore for years. She saw the cracks she had helped create. Izuku, baby, is that true? Her voice wavered, full of fear she had never imagined she'd feel toward her own son. Did you really think about? He couldn't look at her. Yes. Inko pressed a hand over her mouth, shoulders shaking. But why didn't you tell me? Her tears dripped onto his shoulder. I didn't know you were hurting like this. I should have noticed. I should have. Izuku shook his head frantically. No, please. It's not your fault. But Mom was crying too much, guilt crashing over her like a wave she couldn't stand against. You didn't. It's not you. It's everything. It's the world. It's me. Ryukyu placed a comforting hand on his back. Midoriya, she said gently. Would you like to tell us what led you to that rooftop? Izuku swallowed, throat tight. I wanted to be a hero, he whispered. My whole life. I was born quirkless. And today, someone I believed in told me that meant I never could be one. Ryukyu and Mom exchanged a look, one part disbelief, one part fury. Who? Ryukyu asked quietly. Izuku hesitated, but the truth tumbled out. All Might. Mom's breath hitched. Ryukyu's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, just enough that Izuku knew she was furious, though not at him. After a long silence, Izuku spoke the words he had been avoiding. I didn't want to exist anymore. If I'm not here, Izuku murmured, standing up on shaky legs. I can't burden anyone anymore. I can't disappoint anyone anymore. I thought, if even All Might said I couldn't be a hero, then maybe you'd agree. Mom shook her head furiously. No, Izuku, I would never want you to. I would rather have you alive and quirkless than lose you to something like this. You hear me? Izuku hugged her tighter. Mrs. Midoriya, Ryukyu spoke softly, her expression serious. I need to ask you something. And it may be painful, but it's important. Mom wiped her eyes, nodding shakily. Oh, of course. Anything. Has Izuku ever shown signs of hurting himself before today? Ryukyu asked, voice respectful but direct. Even indirectly? The room went still. Izuku's breath hitched. Nejire looked at him in concern. Mom hesitated. She was trying to recollect something, anything. Maybe. I don't know. He was always so withdrawn. So sad after Katsuki stopped being his friend. I tried to help him, but he never said anything. He never shed a tear over it. Not in front of me. She gave her son a look. Even when he came home with bruises and burns, he had a smile on his face. I thought it was just kids being kids. But this. I thought he was dealing with the bullying. And the lack of a quirk. And school. And his dreams. Her lips shook as new tears fell. I thought Izuku was strong enough to. I didn't know he was doing it all alone. Mom kept talking, her voice breaking. I'm his mother. I should have known better. I should have known that he was in pain. She put her hands over her face. I thought that if I just loved him enough and kept him safe, he would be happy. I should have. I had no idea my baby was in so much pain. I failed you, Izuku. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Izuku's chest felt tight. He didn't want her to blame herself. No, Mom, he choked out. It isn't your failure, Ryukyu said gently. Your son has carried this weight alone for a very long time. Too long. He was trying to spare your feelings. Nejire's voice rang in the quiet room with surprising firmness. You can't blame yourself for not seeing what he didn't want you to see. Inko slowly uncovered her face. He's such a good boy. He deserves so much better than the world has given him. Midoriya, Ryukyu said softly to Izuku kneeling before him. I'm happy you're still here, His eyes stung. More tears. I don't know why I'm crying so much, he choked as he wiped at them furiously. Because you're exhausted, Ryukyu answered. And frightened. And because you finally have room to breathe. Izuku's breath broke. And this time, when he cried, it wasn't sharp or panicked, it was slow, aching, like poison finally draining out. Nejire and Mom wrapped an arm around him. The quiet that followed was heavy. An hour later, the storm of emotions had settled. Mom looked at Ryukyu, desperation and determination warring in her eyes. What do we do now? How do I help him? Ryukyu answered immediately. Support, structure, and professional help. Your son will need ongoing therapy. I know someone who can help. I'll call him tomorrow to see if we can make an appointment. And if he ever needs a place to feel safe, my agency is always open. Mom took a shaking breath. I'll do whatever it takes. That's all we ask, Ryukyu said gently. Thank you again. Truly, Mom said, bowing deeply to Ryukyu, her voice thick with exhaustion but firm with gratitude. She turned to Nejire and bowed even lower. And thank you for saving my world. Nejire waved her hands frantically, her cheeks dusting pink. Please, Mrs. Midoriya, you don't have to bow. I just happened to be there. I'm glad I was. Ryukyu placed a hand on Inko's shoulder, stopping her. Go home, Mrs. Midoriya. I will be in touch tomorrow regarding the therapist I mentioned. My agency will handle the costs. I couldn't possibly. It is not a request, Ryukyu said gently, leaving no room for argument. I'll have one of my staff escort you and Izuku home. Thank you, but we can make it to the train station on our own, Mom reassured the pro. Her arm looped protectively around her son's shoulders. Izuku didn't mind. He needed the anchor as they prepared to leave through the glass doors. Wait, Izuku! Nejire's shout stopped them. She darted back to the table and scooped up the notebook he had forgotten. You almost left this. She held it out with both hands. Izuku glanced at it, then back at her, a shy flush creeping up his neck. Actually, you can keep it, he said quietly. If you want. Nejire blinked, tilting her head. But it's your hard work. I can't take it. But you seem to like reading it, so, you can keep going. I mean only if you want to. It's not too much trouble. I don't want to be a bother, and if it's weird or... Nejire's expression shifted from confusion to radiant, beaming excitement. She beamed so brightly that Izuku thought the room got warmer. I'd love to. She hugged the soggy notebook to her chest. There are so many pages I didn't get to read. And I have, 100 questions like, what about Ryukyu's dragon form? Have you analyzed that yet? She paused, giggling at her own enthusiasm. Okay, I'll save them for next time. She clutched the notebook to her chest triumphantly. Next time? Izuku repeated, dazed. Well yeah. Nejire chirped. I'm dropping this off at your place tomorrow after my afternoon shift. She blinked, then added sheepishly. Actually, I don't know your address. Or your number. So, can I have it? Pretty please. Izuku's brain blue-screened. His mother coughed softly because she was still emotional, of course. Absolutely, only because she'd been crying. Definitely not because she found these two adorable. Oh, all right. Izuku fished out his phone, fumbling. Nejire leaned in too close for his heart rate to remain medically safe and typed in her number with a flourish. Now you can text me anytime. Or call. Or send pictures of puppies. Or ask about hero things. Anything. She paused. Just don't disappear, okay? Izuku looked at her. The blue hair, the kind eyes, the girl who had given him a reason to stay. He nodded quickly. I won't. And he meant it. Nejire waved them off at the lobby doors, bouncing on her toes. Bye, Izuku. Bye, Mrs. Midoriya. See you tomorrow. Izuku and his mother didn't speak much as they walked toward the train station. There wasn't much left to say tonight that hadn't already been said in tears and apologies. Inko kept her arm wrapped tight around his shoulders. They were waiting at the crosswalk when the adrenaline finally faded entirely, leaving Izuku's brain sluggish and hazy. He looked down at his phone, which was still clutched in his hand. The screen lit up with a notification. New contact added Nejire Hado Nejire-chan. A message followed shortly after. Get home safe. Can't wait to dive into your genius notes. Sweet dreams. He stared at the name and the cute emojis attached to it. The events of the last few hours replayed in his mind like a fever dream. The rooftop. The breakdown. The Coco. The way she had comforted him. The way she had looked at his notebook as if it were a treasure instead of trash. And then, a singular, bewildered thought cut through the exhaustion, the trauma, and the lingering sadness, grounding him in a reality that was somehow even stranger than fiction. I just gave my phone number to a girl. Blinked, looking at the name on the screen again. A really, really pretty girl. An older high school girl. A pro-hero's sidekick. An angel with bright blue hair and a smile like the sunrise had his number. And tomorrow, he will be seeing her again. Heat rushed to his face, cutting through the chill of the night wind. He stared at the screen so long his mom gently tugged his sleeve to get him walking again. Izuku? Are you okay? Inko asked, feeling him flinch. Izuku quickly shoved the phone into his pocket, ducking his head. Why, Mom? Izuku stammered before looking up at the night sky. The city lights drowned out the stars, but he knew they were there. He was unable to stop the tiny, stunned smile pulling at his lips. I think I'm going to be okay. Tonight he walked home beside his mom. Tomorrow he will meet with heroes who cared. And somewhere in his notebook now held in the hands of a girl who called him a genius. A new chapter was waiting to be written. He still felt small. Exposed. But the crushing loneliness wasn't there. Not fully. Never again, he hoped. For the first time since the rooftop, he felt a fragile thread of hope. Not strong, not sure, and not a sudden cure. But it was there, the first step toward healing. Ryuko Tatsuma was in her office with a cup of herbal tea, still thinking about what had happened the night before and how Izuku Midoriya was doing. She had been in hero work long enough to know what a survivor looked like, and his story affected her. A kid without a quirk was pushed to the edge by a world that valued power above all else. Yesterday, she along with other heroes had aided Detective Tsukachi and the police force in successfully taking down a sect of the Creature Rejection Clan. Each member was arrested, kicking and screaming their dogma as they were loaded into the vans. Shortly after, she received a call from Aquawoman, informing her that Nejire had brought a boy to the agency and that her sidekick sounded rattled. That's when Ryuko began to worry. Nejire Hado did not scare easily. If she was rattled, the situation was dire. After informing Tsukachi of her reasons for leaving, she returned to her agency as quickly as possible. The moment she laid eyes on Izuku Midoriya, Ryuko's gaze softened. She saw signs she recognized all too well in the dull gloss of the boy's eyes. He's trying not to fall apart. The sight pulled old ghosts out of her mind, her first years as a hero, when every villain attack felt like drowning in expectations she couldn't possibly meet. No one that young should look that hopeless. Ryuko had asked Nejire to come into her office so they could talk somewhere private. She waited patiently, steadily, not pushing for information right away. Nejire. What happened? Nejire's lip trembled, but she held steady. He was on a rooftop. And he was going to jump. Nejire didn't provide the grisly details. She wanted them to come from Izuku, but Ryuko could see that the boy was carrying a burden too heavy for one person to bear. She thanked Nejire for telling her the truth and praised her handling of the situation. Ryuko had done everything she could to protect her sidekick from situations like this. Nejire was talented, but also young, and Ryuko worried for her mental health as much as her physical safety. She was no stranger to that weight. The Dragoon hero built her agency on discipline and empathy, having forged her path to this point in fire and isolation. No matter where I go, society always seems to discard the different. I won't let it claim another. From the moment Ryuko drew her first breath in Okinawa, under a thatched roof in a modest home, the whispers started. Half-breed. Why does she look like that? Her mom's not from here, right? Hiroshi, her Japanese father, took care of the family's small pineapple farm. She affectionately called him Baba. He was a quiet man with skin weathered by the sun, and a quirk that made his hands as hard as stone for farm work. He would clench his jaw and pull Ryuko closer, but even he couldn't stop the pain. Her Chinese mother, Mei or Mama, wove baskets from pandanus leaves to help carry the fruit to the market. She had a gentle voice accented by the lilting tones of Mandarin, and she taught Ryuko songs from her childhood in Guangzhou. Those songs, beautiful as they were, only drew more sidelong glances when they echoed through the village paths. By the time Ryuko was 5, she sat apart from the other kids at the local kindergarten. The others, with their developing quirks, chased each other in games of tag made exciting by bursts of sparks or floating toys. It didn't matter that her quirk hadn't shown up yet. It was her face, her mannerisms, and the way she said some words with a slight accent from Mama's native tongue that made her an outcast. One afternoon, Kenji, the local bully, and his gang of pint-sized tyrants snickered as they formed a circle around her during recess like a pack of yipping dogs. Their numbers dwarfed Ryuko's petite frame. Kenji, with a mop of unruly hair and a smirk that twisted his face into something ugly, flexed his fingers, summoning the pesky gusts of wind that were his meager quirk. He used it to shove her around while the others casually spat taunts and slurs they could only have picked up from their parents. Freak. CHK. Mongrel. The wind whipped up, not strong enough to harm, but plenty to shove her backward. Her sandals scraped against the gravel as the bullies howled with laughter, egging him on with more vile taunts they'd repeated from home. Ryuko's small fists were clenched at her sides, her knuckles turning white as heat flooded her cheeks. It was a mix of shame and rage that burned hotter and hotter. She wanted to yell that Mama was strong and kind, and that her blood didn't make her any less Japanese than they were. But she couldn't muster the words. She was scared, and her voice was weak. She knew that fighting back would only make things worse. Her heart raced, and she breathed in short, ragged gasps as the circle got smaller and the wind pulled at her clothes. The jeers got louder, more insistent. Then, something inside her broke. It didn't break with a crack. It broke with a deep, primal rumble that started in her chest, then spread as a wave of scales moved across her skin like wildfire. Her bones shifted with horrible pops as her body grew and her limbs turned into strong, clawed appendages. With a leathery snap, wings opened up from her back, and her face turned into a snarling mouth with eyes that glowed with an otherworldly rage. A low growl came out of her throat, loud and unintentional, shaking the playground equipment. Her quirk had manifested. The bullies froze, their laughter dying in their throats. Kenji's wind quirk fizzled out mid-gust, his face paling as he stumbled back, eyes wide with terror. "Monster!" The children shrieked, scrambling away in a panic, some tripping over their own feet as they fled toward the teachers. The rest of the school stared in horrified awe at the little girl who had turned into a giant dragon. Ryuko's newly awakened instincts took over as screams filled the playground. Her heart raced with fear, and without thinking, she took off into the sky. Her wings flapped wildly, the ground blurring into a green and blue haze. The wind howled past her scales, but it did nothing to drown out the echoes ringing in her ears. Monster. She didn't know how to control this strange body that felt both strong and completely wrong. She roared as she flew home, the only safe place she could think of, as tears fell and disappeared in the rush of flight. The Tatsuma family's home was ahead, its thatched roof a familiar refuge in the rolling hills. But Ryuko's landing was anything but graceful. Her wings gave out in midair, muscles unused to the strain, and she plummeted into the pineapple field just outside the house. The impact sent up a spray of dirt and broken stalks, and her scaled body tumbled end over end until it came to a stop in a cloud of dust. The ground shook, and a low, animal-like groan escaped her maw. Baba, always the protector, burst out the door, grabbing a hoe as a makeshift weapon. Mama followed, holding a kitchen towel close to her chest, her eyes wide with alarm. They skidded to a halt at the sight of the colossal dragons sprawled in their fields, nostrils flaring, wings crumpled awkwardly, and a tail lashing in distress. Ryuko expected them to attack her. But for some reason, perhaps it was the indescribable bond between parents and their children they knew. "Ryuko?" Ryuko whimpered, a sound so small and vulnerable amid her massive frame, curling in on herself like a scared child. It's her, our girl. They ran forward without hesitation, trampling the uprooted plants to get to the shaking figure. Mama slowly reached out to touch the scaled side, finding it warm and rough under her hand. She began to hum one of those old lullabies. Baba looked around, then ran back to the house, emerging moments later with a thick, woven blanket to throw over her. Ryuko didn't realize at the time that her sudden transformation had reduced her clothes to confetti. Breathe, Ryuko. Focus on us. You're safe. Slowly, under their coaxing words and comforting presence, the scales began to recede. Ryuko's form shrank with pops and shifts that made her wince. Wings folded away, claws retracted into fingers, and soon enough, a tear-streaked 5-year-old girl huddled beneath the blanket, shivering in her parents' arms. The years that followed Ryuko's quirk manifestation were a haze. The playground incident etched itself into the village's collective memory, and whispers gave way to outright jeers whenever she had the guts to go beyond the Tatsuma farm. Monster! At school, the kids who used to make fun of her for her heritage were now afraid of her, but fear quickly turned into cruelty. During class, they stayed away. But after the bell rang, groups of them would follow her home along the dusty paths, their small hands clutching stones picked up from the roadside. They threw them with enough force to split her skin and draw beads of blood. Go back to your cave, dragon freak. More stones came after that. First, there were pebbles, and then there were fist-sized chunks that hurt her arms and legs as she ran. They left small scars on her skin and big wounds in her heart. She didn't fight back. She didn't let the scales show. To calm her down, she remembered Mama telling her stories about Chinese dragons from long ago that were not monsters but protectors. Baba taught her how to control her anger like a storm by doing breathing exercises. Control it, Ryuko, don't give them more reasons to hate. But even their love couldn't erase the isolation, the way she flinched at her own reflection in the river, seeing only the potential for destruction. The forests surrounding the village became her refuge. She hid in the dense thickets of bamboo and subtropical greenery where the air hummed with cicadas, and the scent of wild orchids masked her own fearful breaths. There, away from prying eyes, she could let her quirk slip free, let the beast within take flight. It felt liberating and terrifying all at once. By 12, the village had settled into an uneasy truce with her tolerating the half-breed dragon, as long as she stayed small and human. But peace was shattered one fateful night. It didn't start with an alarm. It began with the smell, a thick, choking stench of sulfur and burning wood that woke Ryuko from a deep sleep. The air in her room was already sweltering. Ryuko stumbled out of bed just as the first scream pierced the night. The floorboards beneath her bare feet groaned, then snapped. A tremor violently shook the house, knocking family photos off the walls. Outside, the world had turned into hell. Fissures spiderwebbed across the pineapple fields, glowing with an angry, molten orange light. Magma was rising from the earth, not naturally, but pulled forth by something. Baba kicked her door open. He was coughing, sweat slicking his face. Ryuko, we have to go. Now. They found Mama in the main room, desperately trying to grab the emergency bag, but the house gave a sickening lurch. The main support beam, eaten away by the unnatural heat rising from the soil, cracked with the sound of a gunshot. Look out! Baba lunged. He activated his stone hand quirk, catching the falling beam just before it could crush Mama. His knees buckled under the weight, his skin turning gray and rock-hard, but the heat was intense. The wood was already burning his hands. Hiroshi! Baba strained against the crushing weight of the collapsing roof. Take Ryuko and run to the forest. Ryuko screamed, grabbing his arm, but the skin was searing hot. No, Baba! A second tremor hit. The villain, a hulking figure silhouetted against the burning village, stepped onto their property. He called himself Goliath. He was massive, his skin like obsidian, magma dripping from his pores. His laughter, a deep, rumbling sound, shook the ground more than his footsteps. With a casual flick of his wrist, he sent a wave of lava crashing through the front of the house. The floor beneath them dissolved. Baba looked at Ryuko one last time, his eyes filled with an infinite, heartbreaking love. Go! The roof gave way completely. Baba shoved Mama and Ryuko backward, shielding them with his own body as the burning timber and molten earth swallowed him whole. No! The scream tore from Ryuko's throat, raw and bloody. Mama scrambled backward, clutching Ryuko, her own clothes catching fire. They were trapped in the debris, the heat becoming unbearable. Mama looked at Ryuko, her face streaked with soot and tears. She cupped Ryuko's face, her hands trembling. Ryuko! Close your eyes. Mama began to hum the lullaby from Guangzhou to calm her daughter. Her voice was weak, laced with the smoke she'd inhaled. Goliath stepped closer, the heat radiating from him turning the air into a shimmering mirage. Pathetic insects. He raised a massive fist, dripping with liquid rock, preparing to crush what remained of the house. Mama hugged Ryuko tight, shielding the girl's head with her chest. I love you. I love you so, Moo. The fist came down. The impact didn't kill Ryuko. Mama took the blow. Ryuko felt the warmth of her mother's body go rigid, then limp, shielding her daughter until the very end. The metallic tang of blood filled Ryuko's mouth. The silence that followed was louder than the screams. Something inside Ryuko didn't just break this time, it was utterly destroyed. The fear that had shackled her for years, the shame of being a monster, the desire to stay small, it all burned away in the heat of her parents' pyre. A roar shattered the night, not the high-pitched shriek of a child, but the deafening, tectonic bellow of an apex predator. Debris blasted outward. Goliath shielded his eyes as a massive shape erupted from the ruins of the farmhouse. Ryuko rose, her dragon form larger than it had ever been, fueled by pure, unadulterated grief. Her scales were harder, her claws sharper, her eyes glowing with a white-hot fury. What the? Goliath took a step back, his arrogance faltering. Ryuko didn't give him time to speak. She lunged, her jaws clamping down on his magma-hardened shoulder. The heat seared the inside of her mouth, burning her tongue, but she didn't let go. She thrashed, tearing him off balance. Goliath roared in pain and struck her side with a fist of magma, burning through her scales, scorching the flesh beneath. The pain was blinding enough to make her black out for a second, but the image of Mama's limp hand drove her forward. She took to the air, dragging the heavy villain with her, her wings straining, tearing at the edges under the weight. She climbed higher, ignoring the lava burning her chest, ignoring Goliath's punches that cracked her ribs. At the apex of her flight, she stopped. She looked into Goliath's eyes that now held the same fear he had inflicted on the village. She folded her wings and dove. They fell like a meteor, a streak of gray and orange against the night sky. Ryuko shifted her weight at the last second, slamming Goliath into the earth with the force of a crashing plane. The impact cratered the pineapple field. The shockwave knocked the fires out in the immediate vicinity. Goliath lay broken in the center of the pit, his magma cooled, his consciousness gone. Ryuko stood over him, heaving, bleeding, her left wing dragging uselessly in the dirt, the bone fractured from the impact. She threw her head back and let out a sound that was half roar, half sob into the smoke-choked sky. Many lives were saved that night because Goliath was stopped before his rampage could spread to the village. But the victory felt hollow. Ryuko crawled through the wreckage to where her parents were lying when the first light of dawn broke through the smoke. She was tired and back in human form. She saw them together. She pulled their bodies close together and linked their hands, a silent testament that they had faced the end together. She sat there for hours, the screams of the night replaying in her mind, promising the silence that she would never again be too scared or too slow. That promise to protect the weak, to honor her parents, and to prove that differences were not a curse fueled her decision to enter UA High. There, she met her best friend, Rumi Usajiyama. She was harsh, physical, and uncompromising, but also honest. She didn't care about quirks or heritage, she only cared about spirit. You didn't just make Ryuko strong, it refined her. Her internship with Best Jeanist was the turning point. The fiber hero didn't teach her to suppress the beast, he taught her to make it look good. If you think of yourself as a monster, the world will agree. Elegance isn't about being soft, Tatsuma. It's all about control. If you make the dragon a queen, they will bow instead of run. Years later, that advice led her to start the Draguar clothing line, turning her unique style into a symbol of high fashion rather than fear. She moved up the ranks, got HPSC funding, and built an agency that ranked among the top 10 in the industry. But the scars lingered. Ryuko shifted in her office chair, a phantom ache pulsing in her left shoulder, where her wing would sprout a stiff, persistent reminder of the fracture from the fight with Goliath. It flared up when she was tired or when the weather turned cold. Mentoring Nejire had healed some of those emotional wounds. The girl's boundless energy echoed Ryuko's stifled youth. But now, seeing Izuku, a quirkless boy mirroring her own outcast days, quivering, grief-worn, breaking, stirred a deep, maternal protectiveness within her that she hadn't felt in years. I've clawed my way out of that pit, and Izuku Midoriya deserves the same chance. The fact that he's still here means his story isn't over. And we're going to help him write the next chapter. It wasn't going to be a single conversation and a hug. It was going to take days, weeks, months. She would help him, protect him, strengthen him. She would not let this child become another casualty of hero society's blind spots. Whatever it takes. It was Sunday, which meant no school. That also meant Nejire had the morning to herself, free time to read more of Izuku's notebook before she had to clock in at the agency for her afternoon shift, patrol duty starting at 2 p.m. sharp. She wore an orange top, blue shorts, and knee-length socks, and her blue hair was tied back in a ponytail. A simple outfit perfect for relaxing. She flipped it open, revealing pages crammed with sketches, notes, and diagrams. Quirk breakdowns, strategy trees, even hypothetical matchups. She then landed on a sketch of Kamui Woods, still visible despite some ink running and blurring the lines. Still, it was meticulous and detailed, just like Izuku's sketch of MT Lady. Besides the drawing, the margins were crammed with dense, frantic handwriting, small text, scribbled in red and black pen, arrows pointing to joints and anchor points. Despite the tensile strength of Kamui Woods' lacquer chain prison binding being estimated at 4,000 psi based on the concrete cracking in the Dagoba district fight, it only gets an 87% efficiency rating at best. And if he is surrounded by fire or is dehydrated, it is completely useless. He could make the structure 15% stronger if he braided the branches in a Fibonacci spiral instead of a regular weave. He also goes too far to the left when using it. A villain with a speed quirk could exploit the 0.4-second lag in his retraction. Nejire flipped through the notebook to another random page, one she was hoping to find, her eyes widening in awe. "I knew it!" she exclaimed. "He does have one on Ryukyu." Izuku had drawn an anatomical diagram of Ryukyu in her dragon form. The shading was precise, the joints articulated with tiny arrows showing direction of motion. Izuku had captured the curvature of her claws mid-swing and the exact shape of her wings, though there was a slight asymmetry to them. There was a little note next to the sketch talking about her wing structure. While watching one of her fights against a giant villain, I noticed her left wing made micro-adjustments. A compensation pattern is evident when she makes tight turns. When she goes down a steep slope, her stamina usage increases. At high altitudes, wind shear can make a weak spot that can be exploited. To ease the strain, I would suggest either rotational warm-ups or alternating spiral descent techniques. Old injury? Nejire blinked and sat up straight, knitting her eyebrows. Ryukyu never mentioned anything about an old injury. And Izuku noticed that just by watching one of her fights. She flipped through the notebook again, going deeper in, page after page, entry after entry, all filled with meticulous breakdowns of different heroes like a tapestry. She kept reading. She found a section on Endeavor's Hellflame, dissected for heat thresholds and optimal combat ranges, and potential counter-strategies that he should be aware of. She landed on one about Hawk's quirk, Fierce Wings, broken down into easy-to-understand mechanics, with hypotheticals on aerial combat, predicted quirk evolutions, and tactical countermeasures that Izuku hypothesized from detailing a battle with a villain from a recent new clip. She flipped again, landing on other heroes like Edge Shot, Gran Torino, Death Arms, and even Backdraft, whose ability to control water was compared to fluid dynamics principles, and citations of the source Izuku got that information from, including the name of the book and the library where he found it. There were a lot of hero entries, each filled with hyper-detailed analysis of their weaknesses, strengths, patterns, fight rhythms, and stamina profiles. Nejire's eyes lit up like stars. This is pro-level stuff. Izuku knew his heroes. In Nejire's humble opinion, he probably knew them better than they knew themselves. He knew their strengths, weaknesses, habits, and tells. He saw patterns in quirks that others like her missed. He saw the math beneath the magic, the physics beneath the fantasy. He really was a genius with a mind like a hero. Then she landed on a detailed sketch of All Might in his prime, muscles bulging, smile radiant, charting estimated power outputs and recovery times based on footage Izuku had watched of his fights. His estimated strength output is beyond measurable. Perhaps a strength amplification quirk. The estimated power output is between 300% beyond human limits and possibly limitless. His Detroit Smash based on velocity and impact generates about 2.5 tons of force per square inch, but adjusts to minimize property damage and avoid harming nearby bystanders. As a side effect of his raw strength, All Might's punches grant him a form of weather manipulation whenever his fists impact his target. Wind pressure varies with the punch's angle, which a tactical opponent could exploit. If he rotates his fist at the moment of impact, corkscrewing the air pressure, he could create focused tunnels of vacuum rather than widespread blasts. Beneath the analysis, Izuku had scrawled personal musings. If I had this, I could be like him. Nejire flipped the pages again, so that she would not give in to the temptation of scribbling something rude in that part of Izuku's notebook. All Might is also a big meanie who crushes people's dreams. Or something along those lines. Honestly, she was still angry that the symbol of peace, the number one hero, was the one who drove Izuku. And that look on Ryukyu's face when she learned that from Izuku himself, if Nejire didn't know better, she would have assumed that her mentor was going to turn into a dragon, track down All Might, and eat him for dinner. Nejire flipped through more pages until she landed on one featuring a hero she did not recognize. Who's Katsuki Bakugo? The drawing looked like a middle school student around Izuku's age with spiky blonde hair and an attitude that just resonated right off the paper. Explosions surrounded him, which made sense as that explosion was his quirk, and his title was written in big bold letters. The future number one hero. Below that was a chemical breakdown of how his quirk worked, timestamps showing how much faster and stronger his explosions had become over the years, and even a detailed essay on Bakugo's evolution. Unlike the other pages, though, his writing inside was cramped, obsessive, brilliant in places, yet painful in others. So much of it felt like Izuku was screaming his frustration on the paper. But below that was something more personal. Nejire read it, not because he wanted to, but because her brain wouldn't leave her alone. Or so she told herself. Age 4. Kaken manifests explosion and is encouraged by adults, praised as gifted. Exceptionally gifted with talent unmatched. Age 5. Kaken starts calling himself the strongest, and students and teachers reinforce his behavior and overwhelming confidence. Age 8. The first time Kaken tells me to stop following him, because a quirkless person, a Deku, can only drag him down. Age 10. My first physical incident with Kaken involved bruises and burns, showing off his natural combat instincts. Age 11. Kaken's pattern of aggression increases, suggesting insecurity or frustration. Age 12. Kaken's bullying escalates. He is ashamed of my quirklessness and increases my isolation. Rip. The sound snapped Nejire out of her trance. She looked down, horrified to see she had torn the bottom of the page in half, her grip having tightened unconsciously as she read. Oh no! She gasped, realizing what she had done, and shut the notebook with shaky hands. That must be him. Nejire felt anger swell inside her, having a name and face to put to the childhood friend that Izuku mentioned on the roof. The one who told him it would be better if he were dead. To Nejire, Bakugo's story sounds like a cautionary tale about too much potential and an ego that festered beyond control, and insecurities that twisted them into aggression as quirks became the measure of worth. He probably saw Izuku's persistence not despite his quirklessness, but because of it as a threat to his own superiority. Bullying Izuku became his way of affirming his place at the top, A cruel custom to drown out the whispers of his own vulnerabilities. Still, that didn't give Nejire the right to damage the notebook that Izuku entrusted her with. Hopefully, she could find some tape to fix it before returning it to Izuku. Nejire, lunch is ready. Nejire's head perked up as she heard Dad's voice calling from the dining room, warm and familiar, laced with that gentle baritone that always made her feel like a kid again. She glanced at the clock, realizing just how much time had passed while she was reading. "Coming, Dad." Nejire skipped down the stairs of her family's cozy home, her ponytail bouncing with every enthusiastic movement. The aroma wafted from the kitchen, making her stomach rumble. In front of her, where the table was set, was what others would call a veritable mountain of food, but she would call it a usual lunch. 3 steaming bowls of udon, a plate piled high with carriage chicken, 2 oversized onigiri, a side of takoyaki, and for dessert a massive sundae that looked like it could feed a family of 4. Meanwhile, her dad, a tall man with periwinkle hair and a quirk that allowed him to create sparkles, was already seated, with a steaming bowl of miso soup, a plate of rice, grilled fish, and some pickled vegetables. "There you are. Thought you'd gotten lost on your way," he teased, gesturing to her seat. Sit. Your mom's out running errands, so it's just us today." "Thanks, Dad." Nejire plopped down, grabbing her chopsticks with enthusiasm. "This looks amazing. Did you really make all this yourself? It smells so good." In a blur of motion that rivaled her quirk, she demolished half a bowl of udon in seconds. "Of course," he chuckled. "I can't let my pro-hero-in-training daughter go hungry before patrol. So, how are things going at the agency? Is Ms. Ryukyu keeping you on your toes?" Nejire stopped in the middle of eating, with a noodle hanging from her chopsticks. "Bitch." With a smile, she slurped it up, her cheeks puffing out like a chipmunk's. "Oh, for sure." Then she went after the carriage. Crumbs flew everywhere, and sauces splattered, but somehow they didn't get on her or her dad's clothes. One of the onigiris disappeared into her mouth. Yum, tuna mayo. She drank some of the broth from her udon to wash it down, enjoying the warmth. "What about you? How is work treating you?" Her dad nodded as he chewed his food. Same old at work. Nothing exciting as what you do. Mostly paperwork, meetings, and so on. But someone has to keep the wheels of bureaucracy turning." He paused, his expression softening. "And, how is Izuku doing? You okay talking about it? I don't want to pry if it's agency stuff." The carriage on her chopstick hovered midair for a second, her usual cheer dimming just a touch. She set it down gently. "No, it's fine. And Izuku, he's keeping in contact with me, which is a good sign." Her dad leaned back, folding his arms. "From what you told me last night, it sounds to me you were at the right place at the right time." Nejire poked at her takoyaki, gathering her thoughts. "Izuku's had it rough." She didn't tell her dad about him being quirkless, feeling it was something only Izuku should make known. "He got bullied a lot, and the pressure. It built up. I was flying patrol nearby when I spotted him on that rooftop. He was standing there, looking so lost and crushed." Her dad's eyes widened slightly, but he stayed quiet, letting her continue. "I landed and talked to him. Asked questions. Anything to get him to not, you know." Nejire's voice softened, her fingers tracing patterns on the tablecloth. "After I pulled him to safety, he broke down, telling me he felt worthless. It broke my heart, Dad. He's such a good kid who wants to help others. So I just listened." "That sounds like my girl," Dad said as he reached across the table, squeezing her hand. Nejire nodded, her eyes misty but bright. "Yeah. We talked, and I convinced him to come down, and Ryukyu is working on getting him a therapist. She was thinking of the counselor at UA, Hound Dog." Her dad smiled proudly. "I'm glad. And proud of you, Nejire. Not just for the hero stuff, but for being kind. That's what makes a real difference." He glanced at the clock. "But don't let me keep you, patrol awaits. Eat up and promise you'll be careful out there." "I will, Dad." She finished her meal with renewed energy, nearly knocking over her sundae, which she devoured until the bowl was clean. "Thanks for lunch. And the talk." A few stray rice grains clung to her cheek, But she didn't seem to notice as she got up to put on her hero costume. She was ready to go, her bag containing a fresh set of clothes and Izuku's notebook. Before leaving, she quickly turned around and hugged Dad tightly. "I love you. Say hi to Mom for me." "Love you too, kiddo." He kissed her forehead. "Now, go save the world." Nejire took off with a soft burst of energy, the notebook tucked safely away, her resolve stronger than ever. Ryukyu quietly paced the length of her office as she dialed the number with a steady hand. Her phone was pressed to her ear, the Dragoon hero's expression a mix of determination and quiet frustration. She had already gone through several of her contacts, even people who owed her favors, but they all told her no. Even when she offered to pay them herself, they said no. No justification. No explanation. Just no. "I made a promise to Mrs. Midoriya, and I'm not going to break it." The poor woman, eyes red from crying, clutching her son like he might slip away again, persisted in Ryuko's mind. Izuku needed help, real help. The line clicked, and a familiar gruff voice barked through the speaker. "UA High School Counseling Office. This is Ryo Inui." "Who's calling?" "Ryukyu, Hound Dog," she said calmly, her voice holding the weight of her ranking. "I need to talk to you about making an appointment for a young man named Izuku Midoriya. He doesn't go to UA, but he really needs a good therapist. I told his mother I would set something up after an incident. Please tell me you can squeeze him in." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a low growl that might have been a sigh or a hint of curiosity. The Dragoon hero herself calling? "If a pro like you is reaching out, Tatsuma, it must be serious, huh? Spill it. What's the pup's story?" She leaned against her desk, swallowed hard, and chose her words carefully. "Midoriya's quirkless Inui. He lives in a world that doesn't see him. His whole life, people have bullied him, made him feel alone. It broke him, and if Hado hadn't found him on that roof and stopped him in time..." She could hear Hound Dog's breath hitch. "He's still alive. But I can't just leave it like this. He needs help from a professional. You are the best in the business, and UA's resources are top tier. Please, for a kid who's got nothing else." Quirkless. Woof, that's a cruel hand to be dealt in this world. His answer was a sympathetic rumble that grew softer. "I've seen kids like that get chewed up and spat out. The poor pup has been through a lot. I'd drag him into my office myself if he were one of UA's students and bark through every session until he could stand tall again. I'd fight for him tooth and nail." Ryukyu's grip tightened on the phone, hope surging like a flame in her chest. "Yes, this is it. I knew Hound Dog would get it. I feel for him, I really do." His tone dimmed, heavy with regret, as he continued. "But I can't take on every stray that needs help." The words landed like a punch to her gut. Ryukyu stopped pacing, leaning heavily against her desk as conflicting emotions warred within her. "My plate's full with UA students, heroes in training dealing with their own issues, controlling their quirks, the pressure of becoming heroes. I wish I could help, but my duty is to the students here first. Resources are tight. I'm already stretched thin trying to keep them from breaking. Taking on people from outside. That wouldn't be fair to them. Sorry, Tatsuma. I hope you can understand." Part of her, the practical hero who knew how hard it was to do patrols and paperwork, understood perfectly. Boundaries help them stay sane and do their jobs well. Without them, every hero would fall apart from the stress and the constant need. But another part of her, the fierce protector who fought her way to the top 10 so she could help the weak, rebelled. How many more Izukus are out there? Slipping through the cracks because we're too busy saving the important ones? I became a hero to change this, not to accept it. "I do understand," she said, voice edged with frustration she couldn't entirely hide. "Why does trying to save one life feel like I'm fighting the entire system?" Izuku's wide-eyed desperation flashed in her mind, the way he'd looked at Nejire like she was his last lifeline. That boy. He deserves better than being turned away. He deserves a fighting chance, damn it. It gnaws at me too. A sympathetic growl echoed through the line. Tell his mother to look into public counseling services or private therapists specializing in quirkless support. Might not be UA level, but it's something. Keep fighting the good fight, Ryukyu. You're one of the best. The call ended with a click, leaving Ryukyu staring at her phone. Hound Dog was trying to be helpful, and at least he had a reason behind saying no. Still, it would be easier to take All Might's place as the #1 hero than to find anyone who fits his suggestions. She set it down gently as she exhaled. The internal storm raged on duty versus compassion, realism clashing with the idealistic fire that had driven her into this life. I promised Mrs. Midoriya I'd help. But promises mean nothing if I can't deliver. But she wouldn't stop here. She'd find another way for Izuku, and for Mrs. Midoriya. Hey, Ryukyu. Ryuko looked up to see Nejire standing outside her office door. Everything okay? The people I had planned to help Midoriya? Ryuko sighed. They've been frustrating. That bad? Nejire asked. Ryuko nodded. I'm not giving up. I will find someone who can help Midoriya. But was there something you needed, Nejire? I was just letting you know that Aquawoman gave me today's patrol route, Nejire answered. But there's something I want to talk about with you. It has to do with Izuku and how we can help him. Ryuko straightened her posture. Go on. Well, you'll need to read this first. Nejire reached into her bag and pulled out a worn notebook that Izuku had lent her last night. Let me know what you think when I get back, okay? Nejire left in a bubbly rush before Ryuko could even speak, leaving the notebook the one labeled Hero Analysis for the future number 13 right in front of her. She was about to call her next contact, but stopped, her gaze falling back onto the notebook. Ryuko always trusted Nejire's instincts. She was her sidekick after all and had to trust her to trust him when out in the field. And Izuku entrusted its contents to Nejire, who, in turn, is entrusting it to her. Perhaps it would be worth a quick read. Ryuko opened the notebook, flipping through it methodically and with care. Her brows furrowed at first, then raised in surprise as she read more and more of its contents. She thinks she knows what Nejire has in mind. Izuku thanked God that it was Sunday. He didn't know if he had the mental energy to deal with another miserable day at Aldra Middle School. Instead, he used that focus to begin his work on hero analysis for the future No. The title was pre-written with his usual enthusiasm. Each character was sharp and neat. He had been planning to start it for a while, but he didn't know where to begin. Until today, that is, he already knew who to make his first entry on. Nejire-chan quirk, wave motion. He pulled up some news clips on his phone featuring the Ryukyu agency in action, stopping villains. It's no wonder Izuku's never seen Nejire-chan before. The cameras were more interested in capturing Ryukyu in her dragon form, and the clips of aerial footage were too shaky. Still, he was able to spot Nejire in some frames, helping out in the fights. Still, the video quality made accurate calculation difficult. He drew a full-body sketch of Nejire in mid-air, with swirling energy lines forming rings around her, striking a cute pose he thought she would pull off. He wrote down what he found. Her vitality drain is the main thing that limits her quirk. After 38 seconds of constant fire, her spirals lose their shape. The waveforms change from a tightly coiled corkscrew to a loosely coiled cyclone. This could be because she is getting tired, not because she lacks control. Spiral density determines output efficiency, and an estimated 30% of that emitted energy is wasted in unnecessary wide-range attacks. If trained to modulate energy output with timed pulses, efficiency could increase by 22%. I noticed in footage how the trajectory arcs of the spirals could be tightened, which would result in a higher force and reduce stamina drain by maybe 15%. Underneath, he added a personal note. She'd make a fantastic pro. She smiles a lot like All Might. Despite my current feelings toward him, smiling is important in helping people feel safe. It also makes her look beautiful with her eyes and hair and… Izuku turned scarlet, and he closed the notebook. Stop it. This is supposed to be a professional notebook, Izuku. Then he opened it again, looking at the sketch of Nejire, and felt his face heat up. Wait, did I draw her proportions wrong? Did I make them too big? Is she gonna think I'm sexualizing her? Then he closed it again. His thoughts shift from too loud to too quiet, then back to loud again. He exhaled slowly, trying to suck a full breath into lungs that didn't want to cooperate, but somehow managed to. Why am I still doing these? Writing another notebook filled with stuff no one would read. Izuku always saw his notebooks as his lifeline, a testament to his unyielding passion, a way to feel connected to the heroic world that rejected him. He always thought he could see it. He could see how to make them pro and amateur heroes alike better. He knew how to help them save people more efficiently. He had the plan's 14 notebooks worth, to be exact. But what good was a mind like a library if the library was locked inside a useless building? What good was a strategy without the power to execute it? What good was a map if you didn't have a car to get you from point A to point B? Izuku's hands no longer felt steady while holding the notebook. I tried, he sobbed, clutching the notebook to his chest, curling in on himself. I really tried. I studied harder than anyone. I analyzed everything. I wanted it so bad. Bzz. Bzz. The screen of Izuku's phone lit up with a notification as it hummed. Nejire Heido Nejire-chan. Hey, Izuku. I'm currently on patrol, so I can't chat. But I will see you later to return your notebook. P.S. I may have accidentally ripped a page. I taped it up. I'm so sorry, please forgive me. Izuku stared at the screen for a moment, feeling his heart swelling with warmth that snapped him out of his wallowing, before giving his response. Izuku Midoriya, no worries. And I can't wait to see you again. Seconds after Izuku hit send, he realized what he had just typed. Oh no, did I sound like I'm hitting on her? Izuku asked himself aloud. Lack of sleep last night must be making me reckless. Izuku didn't get much sleep last night, given everything that happened yesterday. Even after bringing tearful relief between him and his mom, receiving plenty of her warm hugs, and having her delicious home cooking, sleep evaded him. Nightmares of the rooftop replayed with vivid drops and winds. But his usual comfort was thrown off by his sleeping on the couch. He didn't want to return to his room, which was covered from top to bottom in all Might merchandise. Izuku! Mom suddenly exited from the kitchen, her hands wringing together in her apron, her round face etched with worry. I heard you crying. Are you? I'm fine. Izuku cleared his throat. Can I help you with cooking? And chores? I need something to take my mind off everything. He had a desperate need for distraction, a need to be useful. Mom had still felt guilt twisting at her since last night, blaming herself for Izuku's current state of despair, and questioning how she could have missed how much he was hurting. But she feels this way because of me. I should have been honest with her from the start. Mom blinked at him. Of course, Izuku, she said softly. But only if you're sure, sweetie. I don't want to burden you. It's no burden, Izuku insisted, his voice steadier than he felt. It'll be good for both of us. She stepped aside to let him into the kitchen. We're making katsudon. I thought you might like some comfort food. Yeah, that sounds perfect. Izuku managed a smile, small but real, and followed her into the kitchen. The familiar scent of simmering broth wrapped around him like a blanket. The next hour was filled with the rhythmic sounds of the kitchen. Izuku took over the vegetable prep, his movements mechanical but precise. Snip, 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 snip. The sound of the knife hitting the cutting board as he focused entirely on the green onions, cutting perpendicular to the root with consistent width to ensure even caramelization. Careful with your fingers, Mom murmured after a pause while she busied herself with the pork cutlets, dipping one into the egg wash. Her concern was gentle but tight around the edges, the kind that came from a place far deeper than just kitchen safety. I've got it, he assured her, his voice wobbling only a little. It wasn't much, but the movement helped. His mind didn't have as much room to spiral when his hands were busy. They worked in quiet harmony for a while. At one point, Izuku caught her watching him again, out of the corner of his eye. The silence between them wasn't just empty, it was heavy, filled with things unsaid, something like an apology swimming behind her eyes. Mom! Mom jumped slightly, nearly dropping the tongs. Yes, sweetie? Izuku didn't look up from the cutting board. The onions are done. Do you need me to start the rice? Please, she breathed. As Izuku moved to the rice cooker, the tension in the room shifted. He stopped, his hand resting on the lid of the appliance. He could feel her eyes on him. The guilt radiating off her was palpable, a physical weight in the small kitchen. "You don't have to tiptoe around me, Izuku," whispered, his back to her. "I know I scared you. I'm really sorry I made you worry." Mom suddenly crossed the small distance between them and hugged him from behind, abandoning the pork as she buried her face between his shoulder blades. He stiffened at first, then melted into the contact. "I was wrong," she muffled into his shirt. She took a shuddering breath. "I shouldn't have apologized. I should have told you that you could be a hero without a quirk. I crushed your dreams before All Might. You don't have to." "I do," she said immediately, then winced at her own suddenness. She softened her tone, placing a hand on her son's shoulder. "Izuku, I should have seen how much you were hurting. I'm your mother." "Mom, you know none of this is your fault, right?" Izuku's throat tightened, but he forced a steady breath. "What happened yesterday? It's on me for not talking about it sooner. I didn't want to worry you. But I'm supposed to worry." She laughed wetly, brushing at her eyes. "That's my job. But I never pushed hard enough. And I know why you slept on the couch last night." Izuku gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles turning white. "I can't go in there, Mom." The bitterness in his voice was new, frightening. "Everywhere I look, he's staring back at me. Smiling. Telling me I'm here, when he really wasn't." "Then we'll change it," she said firmly, pulling back and turning him around to face her. Her eyes were wet, but her expression was determined. "What?" "The room," Mom declared. "After we eat, we'll take it all down, the posters, the figures, the bedsheets. We'll pack it all up. If looking at him hurts you, then he doesn't deserve to be on your walls." Izuku stared at her, wide-eyed. That collection was his life, costing him so much yen and so many years of hero worship. The thought of taking it down felt like erasing his identity. But then he thought of All Might's skeletal form on the roof, the pity in his eyes, the crushing reality of his words. Young Midoriya, a quirkless person, can't become a hero. He looked at his mother, who was willing to tear apart her house to make him feel safe. "Okay," Izuku croaked. "Let's take it down." "Good." Mom squeezed his hands. "But first you need your strength." They returned to cooking, but the air felt lighter. The weight of the secrets and the trauma hadn't gone away, but it was easier to handle. They sat down to eat, and the katsudon's savory steam rose between them. Mom raised her chopsticks. "You know, you always calm down when we cook together," she said. "I like to help," Izuku said. "It makes me feel useful." "You are useful," she continued, squeezing his hand. "You always were." Izuku took a bite. It tasted like warmth. It tasted like home. Sitting here, listening to his mother hum softly as she ate, and knowing he had a friend like Nejire waiting to see him again. Maybe, just maybe, he could live with being plain old Izuku Midoriya. "Mom." "Yes, Izuku? This is really good. Thank you." Mom smiled, and this time, it reached her eyes. "You're welcome, sweetie." Izuku chose to help Mom clean the apartment after lunch. He had busied himself with chores all day, but now, in the quiet of the afternoon, he couldn't stop thinking about what needed to be done. The hallway that led to his bedroom seemed longer than usual. Izuku found himself standing at the threshold of his bedroom door, looming like the entrance to a tomb, the cardboard boxes in his hands trembling slightly. He couldn't keep sleeping on the couch forever. It was lumpy, and his back already protested from the night before. But stepping inside meant facing it, all the walls plastered with reminders of a dream that had been shattered. His eyes kept drifting toward his closed bedroom door, the door he hadn't opened since yesterday. Even from here, he could almost feel the weight of what waited on the other side: posters, figures, notebooks, cardboard cutouts, years of devotion layered like sediment. All Might inspired me to push through the pain, but in the end, he was the one to crush it all. "Izuku," Mom whispered as she stood right behind him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. She followed his gaze. You don't have to go in if you're not ready." "I know," Izuku murmured, his voice quiet but firm, fingers curling at his sides. but I can't avoid it forever. If I don't do it now, I never will. He took a breath, then another, and finally he pushed the door open. When he opened his door, creaking, the smell hit him first, a faint mix of paper, plastic, and the detergent he'd always used to dust the shelves. It smelt like faded enthusiasm. Then he was immediately assaulted by red, blue, and yellow. The room was a shrine, posters of All Might's beaming smile, his fist raised triumphantly, covering every inch of wall space. Action figures lined the shelves in heroic poses, and rumpled bedsheets emblazoned with the symbol of peace. The walls, the desk, the bedspread, the curtains. They all screamed his iconic catchphrase, "I am here," which once was a promise of safety, but now only echoed in Izuku's head with a hollow ring. Izuku's gaze fell on a poster of All Might in his Silver Age costume, which showed him smiling and holding a captured villain over his head with one hand and pointing to the horizon with the other, as if telling him he could reach it. Izuku felt a sudden, heavy pressure on his lungs. It wasn't just a decoration, it was his childhood, his obsession, and a way to escape the bullying and the quirklessness. I can't look at all that stuff anymore. The posters, the figures, it's like they're mocking me. Izuku stepped inside cautiously, as if the room were a minefield, the air feeling stagnant. The room was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like even the posters were waiting for him to say something. He walked to the wall nearest his bed, reaching up to touch the corner of the largest poster. Held up by yellowed Scotch tape was a limited edition poster from All Might's Bronze Age, smashing through a villain's barrier with a Detroit smash, beaming proudly against a backdrop of bright red. It was the first poster he'd ever bought with his own allowance, one he'd saved up for months. He remembered putting it up when he was 8, and Mom had needed a chair to help him hang it with such pride. He reached up. His fingers brushed the glossy paper, which crackled under his fingertips. He hesitated. His throat tightened. "I appreciate your spirit, but it's too dangerous. Without it, Quirk, you can't become a hero." Izuku gritted his teeth as the memory of the rooftop cut through him like a harsh wind. His hand curled, not in anger, but in sharp betrayal. Rip. Izuku peeled at the corner, the tape resisting at first, then giving way with a rip that made him flinch. A soft, tearing sound that was shockingly loud. A flake of paint came off with the tape, leaving a small gray scar on the white wall. Izuku carefully rolled the poster up so he wouldn't crease it, treating it with reverence because even if it hurt now, it didn't erase everything All Might had once meant to him. He placed it into the cardboard box. "I'll get the bedding," Mom said softly, moving past him. She worked quickly, stripping the pillowcases and the comforter featuring All Might's flexing silhouette. She didn't look at the images. She just folded them inside out, hiding the hero away, transforming the bed into a plain, white rectangle. Next was his desk and shelves, lined with figures from the Silver Age and the Golden Age, all in action poses, right in front of his desk lamp. He picked up one of the action figures, his fingers shaking. It was All Might in his Silver Age costume. The paint was chipped from when he dropped it during a simulation of a villain attack back in kindergarten. He remembered buying this one and telling Mom about the articulation points and how the center of gravity was perfectly balanced. He turned it over in his hands, the plastic suddenly feeling colder and heavier than it should. Izuku put the figure in the box after wrapping it in an old newspaper. Not thrown away. Just put it away. He did the same thing with the next one and the one after that. Grab and drop, grab and drop. With every figure that disappeared into the box, the room felt a little larger, the air a little easier to breathe. The rest followed slowly. Posters first. Then, the keychains that Izuku had gotten from raffles. Then the trading cards he had spent hours sorting by edition and rarity. There were a few things that made him stop: a signed vintage postcard that Dad sent him from the USA, a limited edition model that he saved up for, and a t-shirt that he had begged Mom to buy him on his 9th birthday. It felt like taking away a piece of a belief he had held for so long that it had fused to his bones. Mother and son worked side by side until she paused at a framed photo: baby Izuku dressed in an All Might onesie, beaming at the camera. "This one. Do you want to keep it?" Mom asked. "It's you, Izuku." "Not him." Izuku stared at it, his heart breaking. That little boy had so much hope and hadn't been hurt by the world's cruelty. It felt like holding on to a lie to keep it, but letting it go. "No," he said, his voice breaking. "Not right now, but someday maybe." It went into the box, buried under layers of what had once been his world. The room changed slowly over the course of an hour until it was unrecognizable. There were no decorations on the walls, just faint, sun-faded squares where the posters had been for years. The shelves were empty pieces of wood. The floor was free of the sharp piles of goods. With each item put away, the weight on his chest lightened just a fraction. When they finished, Izuku taped the final box shut and stepped back. He sat on his now plain bed, looking around. His room looked emptier, but lighter. It looked like a guest room. It looked like it belonged to a stranger. It looked like it belonged to someone with no personality, no dreams, no future. "I'm sorry," he choked out. He didn't even know to whom, to All Might, to himself, to the dream he lost. I'm sorry." He pressed his palms to his eyes, trying to hold back the tears, but they slipped through his fingers anyway. A warm presence sat beside him, the mattress dipping under her weight. Mom wrapped her arms around him without a second thought, pulling his head onto her shoulder. He leaned into her, letting his forehead rest against her shoulder as she held him like she had when he was much younger and scraped his knees on the playground. "It's okay to let go, Izuku," she whispered. "You're more than this. You always have been." Izuku's breath hitched. "We can redecorate. Anything you want. Maybe some nice landscapes? Or a band you like." Izuku didn't answer. He just stared at the bottom shelf of his bookcase, the only place they hadn't cleared. It was where he kept his notebooks. He got off the bed onto the floor, reaching into the back of the shelf. In the process of clearing the All Might clutter, he had exposed the very back row, where dust bunnies had gathered over the years of neglect. There, wedged behind a stack of old textbooks, was a notebook he hadn't touched in a decade. It wasn't a hero analysis notebook. It was a standard composition book with a black and white marble cover, the corners chewed and frayed. "What's that, honey?" Mom asked. I think this is from before," Izuku murmured. He opened it. The pages were filled with crude stick-figure crayon drawings of heroes, recreating moments he had seen on the news, and notes written in clumsy hiragana. But as he flipped through them, he realized something. They weren't drawings of All Might. There was a drawing of the hero duo, Water Hose, putting out a fire. A drawing of the American heroine, Cargirl, using her quirk to serve as the back wheels for an ambulance. A drawing of Ectoplasm and his clones guiding people to safety. And on the very last page was a note. "When I grow up, I want to help people." It didn't say, "I want to be All Might." It didn't say, "I want to smash villains." It just said, "I want to help." "I forgot about this." Izuku's voice trembled, but not with sadness this time. It was a different kind of realization as he ran his thumb over the waxy crayon letters. The memory washed over him. He was 4 years old, sitting at the kitchen table, drawing this while Mom cooked dinner. This was before the diagnosis. Before the obsession with the symbol of peace took over his entire identity. Before he decided that he had to be strong to be useful. He looked up at the bare walls. "They aren't empty, they are blank canvases." "Mom," Izuku said, holding the old crayon notebook tightly. "I don't need new posters right now. I want to leave it clear for a while. I need to start figuring out who I am without this." "That sounds nice, Izuku." Mom smiled, and it was a real, happy smile. A fresh start. Izuku looked around once more. It wasn't a void, it was space he could fill with something new, something of his own. Yeah. He looked down at the simple desire written by his 4-year-old self. A fresh start. The apartment felt oddly big, and the air was clearer. Still, the stack of cardboard boxes reminded Izuku of the purge earlier. He stacked the last of the All Might boxes near the coat closet and had just sat on the sofa, idly flipping through an old magazine about the wild pussycats he'd salvaged from the purge of his room. He told others and himself that he bought the magazine on the hero team back in elementary school for research purposes. But no one could judge him for buying it for other reasons. "Man, I remember having the biggest crush on Mandalay back then." Mom bustled nearby, preparing tea and snacks, her movements lighter than they'd been in days. However, she still glanced at him every few minutes as if to reassure herself he was okay. If Izuku were to be honest, he felt hollowed out like a bell that had been rung too hard and was now vibrating in the silence. Ding dong. Mom jumped, nearly dropping the tea tray she was carrying from the kitchen. Oh, that must be your friend. She smoothed her apron, glancing nervously at the boxes, then at Izuku. I'll get it. Izuku stood up, his heart doing a slight, anxious flutter as Mom opened the door. Hi, Izuku. Nejire beamed at him, her periwinkle hair bouncing like it had its own breeze. Hello, Mrs. Midoriya. Her voice chimed, bright as a bell. I'm here to return Izuku's notebook. Izuku expected Nejire. He expected her infectious energy. Instead of her hero costume, she was wearing casual clothes, a pastel oversized sweater and leggings, but she still looked radiant. But she wasn't alone. He did not expect the second silhouette standing in the doorway. Nor was he expecting it to be Ryukyu wearing a sharp, casual blazer over a dress shirt, but the aura of authority was unmistakable. Izuku's breath hitched, and for a second, he swore his soul temporarily evacuated his body. Are Ryukyu? Izuku squeaked. Out loud. In front of both of them. Nejire laughed lightly, rocking on her heels. I told you he'd react like that. Ryukyu gave a polite nod. Good evening, Mrs. Midoriya. I hope we're not intruding. Oh, please come in, Mom said, stepping aside. Thank you for having us. Ryukyu's lower, smoother voice followed. She smiled, a calm, professional expression that instantly commanded the room. Hello again, Midoriya. They stepped inside, removing their shoes. Sorry for intruding. Nejire skipped past Mom and the stunned Izuku, heading straight for the living room, but she stopped dead in her tracks halfway there. She spun around on her heel, her blue eyes narrowing slightly, tilting her head as she scrutinized Izuku. You feel different today? Izuku blinked. What? She leaned closely, with her head tilted, invading his personal space with zero hesitation. She's really close. Not that it's a bad thing, she quickly corrected. I'm just noticing that you don't look as sad as you did yesterday. Your eyes aren't all puffy anymore, and you're smiling for real this time. What happened? Did you eat something yummy? Or maybe you took a super long nap. Tell me everything. You haven't? A blush overtook Izuku's face. I can't believe I just thought that. Oh God. Focus. Don't let your inner muttering derail the first good thing that's happened this week. Nejire, Ryukyu warned gently. Personal boundaries. Right. Sorry. Nejire stepped back, pulling a hero analysis for the future number 13 from her bag. Here. As I said in the text, I accidentally tore a page, but I taped it with the invisible kind, so you can barely tell. Oh, thank you, Izuku said, taking the notebook back gently, his fingers brushing hers for a split second that sent a spark through him. And I guess I feel a bit better. Mom and I talked and we cleared some stuff out. It helped. He glanced at Ryukyu, still stunned by her presence. Y is one of the top 10 in our apartment. Please, sit, Mom said as she led the guests to the table in the living room. Make yourselves comfortable. She led them in, fussing over tea trays and pillows, her motherly instincts kicking into high gear. The mood changed as soon as the tea was poured and the steam started to rise. Ryukyu took a sip and set the cup down, and fixed Izuku with a piercing look. Izuku could tell that it wasn't the look of a hero assessing a civilian. I imagine that you are here to tell us you found a therapist for Izuku? Mom asked the pro-hero. Sadly, I have not, Ryukyu sighed, looking at the woman regrettably. I overestimated people's empathy towards those fitting your son's situation. But I still plan to help him, Mrs. Midoriya. She returned her gaze to Izuku. Nejire insisted I look at your notebook. Izuku felt his heart plummet. As she did. Nejire jumped in quickly. Only the cool parts. I didn't show her anything personal, promise. Usually, I dismiss fan mail and amateur analysis, Ryukyu continued. It's often just praise or obvious observations. Izuku looked down at his lap. I know. It's just a hobby. It's stupid. It is not stupid, Ryukyu said firmly. It was accurate. What? Izuku's head jerked up. Ryukyu sighed, a long, tired sound, and rubbed her left shoulder. A villain had injured my left wing many years ago. I thought it was better. The doctors said I was fine. I didn't know I was favoring the right and making sloppy turns until I read what you wrote. I thought I was getting older or slower. She looked at Izuku with a new intensity respect. It was one professional recognizing another. You saw a weakness that I, one of the top 10 heroes, missed myself, Ryukyu said. And you offered a solution. You didn't just criticize, you fixed it. Mom looked between the hero and her son, her mouth slightly open. Izuku, you figured that out just by watching footage of her. Izuku swallowed hard, his throat dry. I'm sorry if it's rude. I notice things. I also read your observation on Backdraft's water pressure. Ryukyu continued. Where did you get those figures? Those aren't public record. Wait, am I in trouble? Is that why she's here? Was my hobby illegal the whole time? Am I going to be arrested for espionage? Maybe I'll get a lighter sentence if I'm upfront with her. I estimated them based on the footage of the fire at Tatooine Station, Izuku stammered, terrified. I counted the frames to measure the water velocity as it left the nozzle, and calculated the force based on the displacement of the debris. I had to estimate the mass of the debris, of course, but I cross-referenced it with standard building materials. Ryukyu looked up at him, her eyes wide, her pupils dilating slightly. You calculated hydraulic force variables. In your head? From a news clip? By counting frames? Why? I like math, Izuku whispered weakly, shrinking into the sofa cushions. That's amazing. The volume of Nijire's awe nearly made Izuku jump out of his skin. It's just stuff I've observed. Always thought. If I can't have a quirk, if I can't be a hero, he muttered, at least I can understand them. Precisely. Ryukyu's lips curved upward. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a sleek, folded document, something official and businesslike that looked stark against the dainty teacups. She slid it across the table toward Izuku and his mother. The hero industry is changing, Midoriya. Villain attacks are becoming more complex. We have plenty of sidekicks who can punch and blast, but we are sorely lacking in people who can think. Ryukyu looked Izuku dead in the eye, folding her arms not in disapproval, but rather, thinking about something. My agency wants to grow its tactical analyst division. You have a gift for noticing things others have missed. She pointed to the notebook that was on the table. And you know more about quirks than anyone I've met. I am ashamed to admit my agency isn't as efficient as it could be. We're wasting time and resources chasing villains we don't know how to catch. 4 months, we've been looking for an analyst to help us predict the villains' moves rather than react to them. We need someone like you to review patrol footage, strategize raid operations, and help my sidekicks optimize their quirks. Mom instinctively reached for Izuku's hand. You want to hire my son, who is still a middle school student? She asked, understandably apprehensive. Legally, I cannot hire him, Ryukyu corrected. But I can give him an internship. An unofficial, part-time role with the Ryukyu agency as an analyst. The room went silent. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall. Izuku stared at her as the offer hung in the air, sounding too good to be true. An internship? At a top 10 agency? For me? For useless Deku? You want me? Izuku pointed at himself, his insecurity rising. But I'm quirkless. I'm a liability. I'm useless in a fight. I don't need you to fight, Midoriya, Ryukyu said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. I have claws for that. Your job will be to tell me where to fight, to tell Nejire to stop wasting energy so she doesn't crash in the middle of a patrol. Nejire actually suggested it, and I believe her when she says you have potential. I need someone who can see things that I can't. It would be invaluable if you could break down problems, anticipate potential issues, and suggest ways to improve them. We have heroes, sidekicks, and interns, but no one who can think as you do. Izuku didn't say anything and just stared at her as if she'd spoken to him in another language. Meanwhile, Nejire beamed, bouncing slightly in her seat. I told her you were a genius. I told her. And that you'd probably faint, but that's okay because I know how to catch people. Her blue eyes shone as she looked at Izuku. You want to be a hero? Well, heroes need brains just as much as they need brawn. Maybe even more. Be my brain, Izuku. Plus, if you work with us, I can show you my waves up close. You can measure them properly. Ryukyu gave a patient smile. Of course, this depends entirely on your comfort and your mother's. Nothing will be expected immediately. But we wanted you to hear the offer directly. Mom reached out and placed her hand over the document, her expression serious. Is it dangerous? Will he be in the line of fire? It wouldn't be field work, Mrs. Midoriya, no danger here. But he would be helping with real hero operations. Ryukyu looked at Mom, and her face softened. He comes to the agency 3 times a week after school to look over footage, quirk interactions, and patterns of rescue. He'll also keep an eye on patrols, review data, write reports, attend training sessions, and, if necessary, plan takedowns of villain organizations. He would be supervised at all times and remain safe. Boys. It might give him the purpose he needs to heal. Izuku? Mom asked softly, her eyes misty as she looked between Izuku and the heroes while squeezing his hand. Do you want to do this? You don't have to decide right now. But if this is something you want, I trust you. Izuku swallowed. His heart thudded painfully in his chest, but not from panic this time, from possibility. Analyst? At a pros agency? Izuku stared at Ryukyu. You don't think I'm too broken to help? Broken? Ryukyu shook her head. Midoriya, you have the most remarkable mind I've seen in years. But even the strongest minds need rest and care. You deserve that. Izuku met his mom's gaze, then looked at the notebook, then back at Ryukyu, offering a future. He looked at Nejire, who was beaming at him with pure, unadulterated belief. Nejire's words played in his head. Villains are easy. You punch them and they fall. Simple. But sadness? Despair? That feeling like you're drowning even when you're standing on a roof? That's the real enemy. That's the hardest villain to beat. The change in Izuku's demeanor that Nejire had noticed, it wasn't just from chores or clearing his room. This blue-haired angel hadn't just saved his life, she'd given him the first real spark of something inside him, small and fragile, that had flickered back to life since the rooftop. Izuku swallowed the lump in his throat. I want to help people. That's all I've ever wanted. If I can do that with a pen instead of a punch. He looked at Ryukyu, his eyes burning with a newfound intensity. I'll do it. Yes. Nejire cheered, throwing her arms up in the air, smiling in a way that made his heart lift. Team Ryukyu just got a huge upgrade. I'll show you the world of heroes properly this time. Ryukyu stood up and extended her hand. Izuku stood to meet her. As he shook her hand, he didn't feel the electric thrill of fanboyism he used to feel. He felt the solid, grounding weight of responsibility. Ryukyu smiled with a genuine, warm expression. Welcome to the agency, Analyst Midoriya. Don't be late on Monday. The final bell rang through the halls of Aldra Middle School, signaling the end of yet another soul-crushing day for Izuku Midoriya. The sound usually signaled a rush to escape before the extras, as Kakin called his classmates, could use him for target practice. He slung his backpack over his shoulder, his green eyes flickering with a rare flash of excitement. Today was different from the usual day of avoiding insults and nursing bruises and burns. Today, the ringing had a distinct, promising sound as he put hero analysis for the future number 14 into his yellow backpack. His hands shook, not because he was scared, but because he was excited. Monday. Today wasn't just another miserable start to the week. Today was Izuku's first day at the Ryukyu agency. An honest-to-goodness hero internship. A real one. And Nejire, bright, beaming, impossible to miss. Nejire had promised to swing by and pick him up, her bubbly energy a welcome contrast to the school's gray monotony. He hurried out of the classroom, keeping his head down, navigating the hallway currents like a ghost. He just had to make it to the front gate. Nejire had texted him 10 minutes ago. Nejire Heido Nejire-chun, I'm almost there. Look for the spirals. Izuku Midoriya, got it. I'll be out front. See you soon, Nejire. The fresh air hit his face as he stepped outside. He scanned the street, clutching his backpack straps. Just a few more minutes and I'm out of here. I'm actually going to be a hero. Izuku stood by the entrance gates, checking his phone every few seconds. He could almost see it training with Ryukyu, learning from professionals, and maybe even getting a taste of what it was like to be a real hero. He tried not to look too excited, but a small smile pulled at his lips. He could almost feel the future stretching in front of him. But fate, as always, had other plans. Oi, Deku! The tone alone was enough to send a shiver crawling up his spine like a crack of thunder, sharp and explosive. Izuku froze, his shoulders hitching up. His heart sank as he turned to see that Kaken was already striding toward him with that jagged, explosive grin, flanked by his usual cronies Tsubasa and Sudarechi, a pair of hyenas who thrived on his volatile charisma. Well, Sudarechi began. Look who's wagging his tail like someone's gonna come get him. What do you want, Kaken? Izuku stammered, backing up instinctively. He glanced around, hoping for a teacher or passerby, but the after-school crowd had gotten smaller. What, can't a guy say hi to his old pal? Kaken's smile grew broader and more predatory. His eyes were full of that familiar disdain for Izuku's existence. You've been acting like you're better than everyone else today, talking about some agency internship. I bet it's with some no-name hero who won't even make it in the top 100. You think someone's pity or fluke makes you hot sheet now? His friends chuckled, closing in. Acting better than... I wasn't. What is Kaken talking about? I'm supposed to meet someone, Izuku tried, clutching the strap of his backpack. Can you meet someone? Kaken sneered, small pops of nitroglycerin crackling in his palms. His two lackeys flanked him, grinning with malicious anticipation. You think you're important enough to have places to be? You're just a pebble on the side of the road. Before Izuku could back away, the spiky blonde hooked a fist around the green-haired boy's collar. He didn't hit or blast him there were too many witnesses. Instead, he and his cronies dragged him away. Don't worry. We'll make it quick. Izuku's heels skidded uselessly against the pavement as they hauled him away from the gate, around the corner, and into the narrow, shadowed alley between the school and a convenience store where teachers rarely patrolled. We just want to teach you some manners before you embarrass our school any further, Kaken growled. Don't think I don't know you're up to something. Please, I'm waiting for someone. Izuku struggled, but it was futile against their grip. The alley reeked of garbage and damp concrete, the perfect spot for their ritual humiliation. Shut up, quirkless loser, Tsubasa sneered, shoving Izuku against the brick wall. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. Nejire's waiting. If I'm not there, if I miss this, please, Kaken, Izuku begged, looking at the small amount of light at the end of the alley. Not today. Shut up. Kaken cracked his knuckles, and tiny explosions went off in his hands like firecrackers. Time to remind you of your place. Whoa. What convenient timing. A wet, sloshing voice oozed out from the sewer grate beneath their feet. Izuku paled, recognizing it. A low, gurgling laugh echoed as a thick, putrid stench filled the narrow alleyway, the smell of rotting garbage and old sewage. The grate rattled violently, and then, like a pressurized pipe bursting, a grotesque wave of dark green fluid erupted upward. All four boys froze. The mass of bubbling muck coalesced into a towering, gelatinous shape with two bulging, manic, yellow eyes embedded somewhere within its shifting, amorphous form, his jagged maw of teeth splitting into a grotesque grin. Izuku's breath hitched. He knew those eyes. He knew that fluid. It's him. The villain from before. The one All Might had saved me from. Look what we have here, the sludge villain gurgled, amused, its voice like bubbling mud. A bunch of brats playing tough. You kids look afraid. But don't worry, I only need one of you to come with me as a hostage. Make it easy, and maybe I won't drown the rest. Which of you wants to volunteer? Tsubasa and Sudarechi screamed, stumbling backward over their own feet. But Kaken didn't move. His ego wouldn't allow it. A hostage? Kaken's eyes narrowed, his arrogance flaring as he barked a laugh, sparks snapping dangerously from his palms. The hell do you think you are, you slimy freak? You think you can take me on? You picked the wrong alley, you piece of shit. Kaken don't. Izuku yelled, reaching out. I'll blow you to bits. Without hesitation, the blonde lunged forward, palms igniting in a blaze of orange, predictably swinging a massive right hook. Die! Boom! An explosion ripped through the alley, slamming into the villain's body with deafening booms, shaking the walls. Smoke billowed, and for a second, it looked like a direct hit. Kaken expected the villain to scatter as his blast tore through part of the creature, sending chunks of sludge splattering everywhere. But as the smoke cleared, the villain merely laughed as the mass reformed almost instantly. Feisty one, aren't ya? You'll do nicely. The villain surged upward like a tidal wave, tendrils snatching around his arms, extinguishing the sparks instantly, and then his torso. What the F dash? The sludge engulfed Kaken's face, silencing his scream instantly. Kaken! Izuku cried out as the sludge enveloped his classmate. Boom, boom, boom. The blonde thrashed, blasting more explosions, but the villain's grip only tightened, pulling him deeper into its oozing mass. Screw this! Sudarechi yelped, bolting for the alley's entrance. Tsubasa, in his panic, forgetting that he even had a quirk that granted flight, followed suit, footsteps echoing as both of them abandoned their leader, sprinting back toward the school without a backward glance. Their footsteps faded into the distance as they chose survival over loyalty. Izuku remained rooted in place, heart hammering, watching his classmate thrash inside the sludge, desperately using his quirk to escape. Boom, boom, boom. He watched the villain expand, swallowing Kaken whole. He could see his muffled struggles inside the liquid. The villain's body churned, suffocating the strongest student in Aldra Middle School effortlessly. Find a pro. Find Nejire. You're useless here. Every instinct screamed at Izuku, but his legs didn't listen. He looked at Kaken, the boy who had tormented him for a decade, and his eyes were wide with a terror Izuku had never seen on his face before. He's going to die. Right here. Right now. Izuku didn't think. He didn't wait for a hero who wasn't there, not when Kaken bully or not was in danger. I have to do something. He dropped his backpack, legs moving before his brain could stop them. Let him go. He roared with a surge of reckless determination, and he charged forward, leaping onto the villain's slippery form. His hands plunged into the slime, cold, sticky, and suffocating, but he didn't let himself recoil, finding purchase on the villain's semi-solid mass. He clawed upward, pulling himself up inch by inch, ignoring the burning in his lungs as the villain's tendrils lashed out. I remember you. The sludgy villain let out a low, irritated growl. Persistent little gnat. Boom, boom, boom. Izuku gritted his teeth, ignoring the slime soaking his uniform and the heat of Bakugo's muffled explosions vibrating against his chest. He forced himself to climb anyway, fingers burning, lungs tightening as the rancid sludge crept up his arms. He hauled himself up, climbing the villain's amorphous body like a mountain, clawing forward until he grabbed hold of Kaken's trapped arm, pulling himself higher, locking eyes with the drowning boy, trying to wedge space between the villain and his classmate. Get off me, Deku! The blonde snarled from within, his voice muffled. But the villain laughed, its body shifting to engulf them both. 2 for the price of 1? Even better! The villain's shape twisted as he climbed up the walls onto the building's roof. Fine, you can both come with me. He jumped from one roof to the next with the 2 boys in tow. Boom, boom, boom. He doesn't know what to do except fight. Izuku held on tight. He didn't know where the villain was going, or why he needed a hostage. But that didn't matter to him right now. I said let him go. Nejire darted above the afternoon traffic, spiraling through the air with a light, bouncy rhythm. The wind blew through her hair as she rode her spirals to pick up Izuku for his first day at the Ryukyu agency, having been entrusted by her to get him. I mean, who wouldn't want to start their first day at a hero agency with a fun flight with the adorable sidekick, Nejire-chan? She looked at her phone for a moment, floating upside down to read the screen against the glare of the sun. Nejire Hado Nejire-chun. I'm almost there. Look for the spirals. Izuku Midoriya, got it. I'll be out front. See you soon, Nejire. She grinned. He's so cute. She started banking toward Aldra Middle School. Boom. The shockwave cracked through the air, rattling Nejire's teeth as she flipped upright. Oh no, that doesn't sound good. Her spirals flickered as she whipped her head toward the Tatooine shopping district. A thick, oily column of black smoke was clawing its way into the sky from a nearby alleyway, not far from the school route, as sirens wailed in the distance. Boom. Followed by another. Boom. And another. Boom. That's bad. That's really bad, Nejire muttered, her playful demeanor vanishing instantly. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the distance. Explosions didn't just happen for fun in a residential district. Boom. Boom. Is it a villain attack? She looked at her phone, then at the smoke, guilt twinging in her chest as her hero instincts kicked in immediately, overriding everything else. I'm going to be late. Oh, Izuku is going to panic if I'm not there. I'm so sorry, Izuku. I'll make it up to you, I promise, but people might be in trouble. With a burst of acceleration, Nejire rocketed toward the source of the disturbance, spirals of energy curling from her legs as she banked hard to the left. She surged toward the smoke, the golden light of her wave motion trailing behind her like a comet. When she shortly arrived at the scene, Nejire halted midair, hair lifting with the sudden stop. The situation looked grim as fire blocked the exits. She expected to see villains plural. She expected frightened civilians, cornered pro-heroes, something fitting the size of those blasts. Where are the pros? Nejire's eyes then widened as she caught sight of someone she didn't expect to see. Izuku was halfway up a towering, undulating pile of sludge dominating the center of the fiery chaos. His fingers were digging into the quivering surface as he climbed with the frantic determination of someone who had never heard the phrase self-preservation. His uniform was smeared with green muck, and he looked like he had decided that fighting a literal living ooze monster was a perfectly normal way to spend after school. Oh my god! Izuku, what are you doing? Get out of there! Nejire yelled, diving down, but the roar of the flames swallowed her voice. Nejire then noticed, trapped inside that suffocating muck, a blonde middle schooler wearing a uniform similar to Izuku's, who was thrashing. He's trying to save a classmate. Boom, boom, boom. The blonde boy was letting off explosions from his palms that only seemed to feed the fire around them. Nejire recognized him instantly from Izuku's notebook. An explosion quirk? Wait, that's Katsuki Bakugo. And he looked more furious than terrified, which was almost impressive considering he was being suffocated. Izuku's trying to save his bully. Nejire watched, heart in her throat, as her younger friend clawed at the villain, digging his bare hands into the filth, trying desperately to pry the sludge away from the blonde boy's mouth. Before she could swoop in, Izuku reached the villain's face. You little gnat! The sludge villain roared, the liquid shifting to engulf Izuku's arm, but he didn't flinch. Take this! Izuku screamed, his voice cracking with the desperate effort of his cry. He balled his free hand into a fist and drove it straight into the villain's enormous, bulging eye. Squelch! The villain shrieked as the sludgy body convulsed violently from the knuckles sinking into the soft, vulnerable spot. The grip on the blonde boy loosened for a fraction of a second, but the villain's rage spiked. Get off me! Sludge whipped outward, and Izuku was thrown back, his small frame ragdolling through the air. He hit the pavement hard, as if the ground were rushing up to meet him, gasping for breath. Izuku! Nejire dove for him without hesitation. Before he could recover, the sludge villain towered over him, forming a massive, dense appendage like a hammer ready to flatten him into the concrete. I'll crush you first, the villain bellowed. Die, you pest! Izuku looked up, eyes wide, throwing his arms up in a futile attempt to shield himself. Nejire's heart skipped a beat. Output, 30%. A spiral of pure, concussive energy slammed into the side of the sludge villain at near-blinding speed, blasting the hammer away as well as kicking up dust and debris just a split second from Izuku's face. A spiral of energy burst from her feet as Nejire shot forward, swooping through the smoke, her arms hooking under Izuku's shoulders in a flash. She banked sharply, the G-force pressing him against her as she pulled him out of the kill zone and hovered 10 feet in the air. Whoa! Izuku blinked up at her, dazed as she clutched him tight. And Nejire? Are you okay, Izuku? She asked. Izuku's face flushed with a mix of adrenaline and embarrassment as he nodded. She huffed, looking down at the boy in her arms, her blue eyes blazing with a mix of relief and scolding intensity. 5 minutes. Nejire shouted over the roar of the fire. I was going to be at the school in 5 minutes, and you pick a fight with a sludge monster alone. What were you thinking, taking on a villain like that all by yourself? That was super brave but super reckless. The sludge villain thrashed wildly, its grip tightening around Bakugo, who was gasping for air between muffled swearing echoing from inside the sludgy chest, firing off explosions with renewed fury. Boom, boom, boom. The fires sparked by his quirk licked at nearby dumpsters and walls, adding to the pandemonium. Gotta handle this quickly. Stand back, everyone. The booming voice of Death Arms cut through. The punching hero led the charge, his muscular frame pounding the pavement like a human battering ram. Beside him swung Slugger, the baseball hero, bat in hand and ready to home run any threat. Kamui Woods slithered through the alley with vine-like limbs, while Backdraft directed streams of water from his nozzles to combat the spreading flames. Lady towered at the alley's entrance, her giant form already shrinking to navigate the tight space. Death Arm's eyes scanned the area, landing on Nejire with Izuku. Hey, you're Ryukyu's sidekick from UA, Nejire-chan, right? Good timing, we could use the Dragoon hero here. Nejire blinked, surprised by the pro addressing her. Sorry, but Ryukyu's not here, it's just me. Death Arms did not look happy with that answer. Alright, you get the civilians clear and keep the perimeter secure. Let us pros handle this slime ball. Backdraft was already shouting orders through a megaphone at the civilians to clear out. Nejire hesitated, her eyes darting back to the suffocating blonde boy. Still, the authority in Death Arm's voice was absolute. As a sidekick, arguing with a pro hero would be considered unprofessional behavior. And anything I do reflects on Ryukyu and the agency, right? Understood. Nejire replied, though her voice lacked its usual bubbly cadence as she sat Izuku down gently, a safe distance away. Stay here, Izuku, and don't move. She turned back to the fight, spirals of energy dancing around her wrists, ready to intervene if the pros faltered. Izuku hesitated, his gaze locked on Bakugo's struggling form. But Kaken, he'll be fine, she promised as she pushed him toward the crowd. I'll help however I can, but you need to stay out of it. Boom. Another explosion burst inside the sludge monster, shaking the street. Death Arms braced himself, arms wide to hold back debris as a car toppled from a blast. Bakugo's struggling silhouette writhed deeper into the creature, swallowed more with each second. Fight, she finished weakly, dread curdling in her stomach as the pro heroes sprang into action, or tried to. How do you like this? Death Arms charged forward, his fist the size of a hydraulic press, swinging in powerful arcs that sank harmlessly into the villain's oozing body, the sludge simply reforming around them. It's like punching jelly. Strike. Slugger followed up with a high-velocity cracking of his bat against the monster's side. The impact sent ripples through the sludge, but it absorbed the blow effortlessly, tendrils snaking out to swat him back. No dice. This thing's too squishy. Slugger backed away as a tendril of slime lashed out. Where are the others? Death Arms roared. I have my hands full. Backdraft yelled, his water cannons blasting the burning storefronts, extinguishing fires with desperate sweeps of his quirk, trying to prevent the entire block from going up in smoke. Can't get a clear shot without dousing the kid too. I can't get close. Kamui Woods shouted, extending his wooden branches, aiming to ensnare the villain. However, the heat from the explosions made the Arbor Hero's quirks brittle and flammable. The fires are too intense, I can't risk igniting myself. Lady, can you get in there? There's no room to maneuver. The peak hero admitted, her expression one of frustration as evidenced by her biting her lower lip. If I gigantify any further, I'll crush half the people here. Damn it. Pathetic. The sludge villain laughed, a wet, gurgling sound, and tightened his grip on Bakugo, whose explosions were becoming smaller, weaker. And you call yourselves pro-heroes? Damn it. Death Arms grits his teeth, planting his feet, wiping sweat from his brow. We'll have to hold the line and minimize damage until someone with the right quirk shows up. No choice, evacuate and contain. Nejire froze. Wait it out? What does he mean by that? She heard a sharp intake of breath and looked down to see that Izuku was trembling not with just fear, but with frustration. His fists clenched so hard his knuckles were white. He won't last that long, Izuku whispered, his voice laced with horror. Look at him. He's stopped struggling. If they wait, Kaken dies. Nejire looked back at the villain. The heroes were standing their ground, forming a wall, but they weren't advancing. I can't ignore orders, but they're letting it happen. The realization made her stomach turn. She could see Bakugo's explosions weakening, his face turning blue as the sludge forced its way into his mouth and nose. The light was fading from the boy's eyes. Nejire, Izuku said, his voice snapping with a sudden, clear sense of urgency. The eyes are his weak spot. Huh. When I hit him before he flinched, Izuku quickly explained. His body is fluid, but his eyes are solid. He looked back and forth between the heroes and the monster. If you hit his eyes with precision, even just one, he'll loosen up, and I can pull Kaken out while he's distracted. Nejire looked at him. Izuku, you can't go back in there. It's too dangerous. She protested. You'll be crushed if it recovers too fast. If we don't do something, he dies. Izuku pleaded, tears pricking the corners of his eyes. The pros aren't moving. You wanted me to become an analyst, and that only works if you trust me. Please, trust me. Something in his determination struck her the same raw heroism she'd seen in her mentors. Nejire looked at the dying boy, then at the frozen heroes, and finally at the fierce determination in her new junior's face. Ryukyu and Mrs. Midoriya are gonna kill me for this. You'd better survive this, Izuku Midoriya, she told him. Stay low and move fast. Nejire floated up, spiraling energy building around her legs, flaring brighter than the fires around them. She leveled her hand, narrowing her focus. She didn't need power, she required accuracy. Hey, sludge face! She yelled. Eyes up here. The villain's massive eyes shifted toward her. You again? Nejire wave, pike. A concentrated beam of spiral energy shot from her palm with sniper-like speed and struck the villain squarely in the exposed eye. Arg! The villain shrieked, partially blinded and in agony. His fluid form destabilized, sludge sloughing off in chunks, and the suffocating grip on Bakugo's mouth slackened as the blonde gasped for air, coughing violently. Go! Nejire screamed. She didn't need to tell him. In that moment of distraction, Izuku was already sprinting. He ducked under Death Arm's outstretched arm, ignoring the hero's shout of protest. He dove into the smoke, darting across the alley like a green blur and sliding on his knees to reach the sludge pile. Kaken! Come on, fight it! Izuku yelled as he grabbed Bakugo's collar and heaved with everything he had. Because of Nejire's attack, the sludge wasn't holding on tight. Deku? Bakugo wheezed, confusion and rage warring in his eyes. Get your demon hands off of me. Boom. He mustered one last explosion to loosen the villain's hold. With a final heave, Izuku tore him free from the monster's grasp with a wet, sking sound. Both boys tumbled to the ground as the sludge recoiled. You're not going anywhere. The sludge villain recovered his sight, one eye bloodshot and furious. He swelled up, abandoning his human shield to become a towering tidal wave of muck, aiming to flatten the two middle schoolers. I'll kill you both. Nejire's heart pounded. She wasn't about to let that happen. Izuku, get down. She commanded from above. Izuku shoved Bakugo down and curled over him. Wave motion's power roared within her. She hovered directly in the path of the monster, her hair floating wildly as she increased her output. The spirals on her arms grew massive, humming like a jet engine. Output, 50%. Nejire wave, surge. She moved both palms forward. A colossal shockwave of spiraling energy, the strongest blast she'd ever fired in civilian space, erupted, slamming into the villain's core with the explosive force of a freight train. There was no resistance. The sheer pressure tore through the villain's midsection instantly, scattering the villain into thousands of droplets that rained down over the entire city block, inert and harmless. The air pressure alone extinguished the fires in the immediate vicinity. Silence fell over the street. Nejire floated down, heart pounding, legs trembling with leftover adrenaline as she landed softly between the boys and the splattered remains of the villain. "Wow," she breathed out, a relieved smile breaking through her worry. "It was close." She felt wobbly and nearly face-planted onto the street. Nejire. But Izuku, despite his deep, rattling coughs and the pain of hitting the pavement, caught her. "I think I overdid it." For a second, nobody moved. Then, the crowd behind stunned pro-heroes erupted in cheers, their voices rising in a wave. "Did you see that? She blew him apart in one shot. That's Ryukyu's sidekick. Nejire-chan." "She's seriously a sidekick? Way to go, Nejire-chan." "Nejire-chan. Nejire-chan saved the day." Paparazzi cameras clicked as civilians surged forward, though they still kept a respectful distance from the heroes and Gu. The paramedics rushed past to check on Izuku, Bakugo, Nejire, and anyone else who may have gotten hurt. Nejire offered a weary but triumphant smile to the crowd. She looked at Izuku, covered in soot and slime but safe and still supporting her weight. "I knew you could do it," he said with a grateful smile. "You scared me half to death, Izuku." She exhaled as a yawn escaped her. Then a small, proud professional thought surfaced. "Nice work, Analyst Midoriya." "I don't need help." Kaken barked, coughing up the last foul remnants of sludge. He thrashed against the paramedics, who were desperately trying to check his vitals and scrape the villain's drying remains from his skin. Izuku, Nejire, and scattered bystanders who were also hurt were receiving the same treatment. Of course. Even after almost dying, Kaken is still Kaken. A few feet away, Izuku sat on the bumper of an ambulance, huddled under the heavy weight of a shock blanket. He rubbed his forearm where he'd taken a rough landing, watching the scene with an exhausted expression. Beside him, Nejire was being attended to by her own team. She looked uncharacteristically drained, her usual vibrant aura had dimmed, and she gripped an energy drink with both hands, sipping it to restore the vitality she'd burned through. The sight made Izuku's chest tighten. I couldn't just stand by and let Kaken die. But Nejire had to push herself even harder to cover me. Now that's what I call guts, kid. Death Arms clapped Kaken on the back, a gesture meant to be gentle that still made the boy wince. Holding out against that villain with those explosions? Impressive stuff. Most people would have blacked out, but you kept him busy until we arrived. Slugger and a downsized lady crowded around the blonde teenager. "You're a tough one," Slugger praised, leaning on his bat. "That quirk of yours is flashy as hell. After the sports festival, come look at my agency." "Yeah, those blasts were no joke," Lady added with a grin and a double thumbs up. "Keep it up, you're pro material for sure." Bakugo scowled, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Tisich, whatever. I didn't need saving." Izuku looked away. His ego is too bruised even to allow himself a flicker of smug satisfaction. The police were still swarming the area, filling out reports, taking photos of the scene, and cordoning off the street and collecting samples of the villain's remains from the burnt garbage and building sides. They were aided by Backdraft, whose precise water streams neutralized the lingering goo into harmless puddles to make sure the villain didn't come back for round 2. As the paramedics finished checking Izuku for burns, finding, miraculously, only scrapes and bruises, a shadow fell over him. It was heavy and imposing. "And you," Death Arms barked, crossing his massive arms. Kamui Wood stood next to him and nodded in agreement. "What the hell were you thinking?" Izuku's breath caught. Charging in like that?" The punching hero kept going, his voice getting louder. You could have been killed and made our job twice as hard. If that villain hadn't been distracted by Nejire-chan, that would have been the end of you, Kamui Woods added, his voice like dry bark. I'm sorry, Izuku stammered. His shoulders slumped, and he bowed his head, trying to shrink into the ambulance. He was my friend and I couldn't. That's no excuse. Death Arms scolded. You don't have a license. Heck, I didn't see you use a quirk at all. Interference like that is a liability. The disparity stung like an open wound. Izuku knew they were right, he had broken the law. But he had acted because the pros had been frozen. Now, he was being treated like a nuisance while the victim was being scouted like a celebrity. Hey, hold on a second. Nejire hopped down from her ambulance. The usual bubbly sweetness in her tone had sharpened into an edge of cold steel. She marched over, placing a protective hand firmly atop Izuku's messy green curls, her blue eyes piercing as she looked the pros up and down. Are we forgetting something? Nejire-chan, Death Arms blinked, his tone softening slightly for a fellow hero, or at least a highly respected sidekick. We're just explaining to the civilian that. You're scolding him for acting, Nejire cut in. But if he hadn't run in, your impressive kid over there would have suffocated. Literally suffocated. Izuku here was the only one moving while you guys were waiting for someone with the right quirk to show up. The pros shifted, their boots scraping awkwardly against the pavement. Civilians interfering is against protocol, Kamui Woods argued defensively. Tactical patience is part of the job. And saving lives is the whole job, Nejire countered. She patted Izuku's head, subtly nudging him behind her. Izuku starts at the Ryukyu agency today. If he hadn't pointed out the villain's weak spot, the eyes, by the way, when none of you noticed, we might still be dealing with that mess. He created the opening, and he pulled the victim out himself. Sure, he was reckless. Reckless doesn't even cover it, Slugger interrupted, lady by his side, thumping his bat against his shoulder. Kid, heroes know what they're doing. You should have left this to us. Lady sighed dramatically, looking at Izuku with a patronizing tilt of her head. Pros are called for a reason, sweetie. Izuku was the only one who didn't stay still. Nejire reminded them, her voice rising. So don't lecture the person who actually did something. The pros stopped and looked at each other while Death Arms rubbed the back of his neck. But rules are rules no matter what. Kid needs to learn boundaries. Are we seriously going to let some sidekick talk to us pros like that? Lady snapped, her patience with Nejire wearing thin. Just because you're the Ryukyu agency's mascot, it doesn't change how things work. You're supposed to follow the lead of active pros. Instead, you went and acted on your own. I'm starting to wonder what kind of students Ryukyu takes in if they can't follow simple orders. Nejire's jaw tightened, a low growl catching in her throat, but Izuku reached out to touch her sleeve. Don't. Nejire took a deep breath, ignoring the peak hero. She turned to the paramedic. Is he clear? The medic nodded quickly. Good. Come on, Izuku. Let's get to the agency before Ryukyu sees the news and has a heart attack. She flashed him a sunny smile that brooked no argument, though her eyes still held a lingering spark of indignation. Thanks for the assist, everyone. Before the pros could offer another rebuttal, Nejire grabbed Izuku's hand. With a sudden, golden burst of her quirk, they lifted off the ground. Come on, Izuku, up we go. She steered them high above the street, soaring past a swarm of hungry reporters who were left shouting questions at the empty air. Katsuki watched as that demon Deku was hauled into the air by the blue-haired sidekick, her spirals of energy propelling them skyward like they were just taking a stroll in the clouds. The crowd below oohed and awed, phones out, snapping pics like a bunch of mindless extras at a fireworks show. As if flying off with some pro's pet project made Deku hot sheet. The wind kicked up as they disappeared over the rooftops, and Katsuki clenched his jaw hard enough to ache. So that's how it is. Fucking Deku, he muttered, shoving a paramedic's hand away for the umpteenth time. His palms still smoked faintly, the smell of burnt ozone mixing with the lingering stench of the sludge He could still taste it in the back of his throat, oil, rot, and pure humiliation. He could still feel that suffocating weight crushing his chest, creeping into his lungs, cutting off his air. The world narrowed down to panic and the sound of his own explosions sputtering out. I didn't need saving. I didn't need help. I didn't need effing Deku. The thought was sharp and automatic. It was the only thing keeping the shaking in Katsuki's hands at bay. I could have handled it. But no, Deku quirkless, useless Deku had to play hero. Rushing in like the idiot he is, grabbing at me like I was some effing damsel in distress. And now? Now the nerd gets a free ride from Nejire-chan of all people. Katsuki's eyes narrowed, following their rise until they were just dots in the bright afternoon light. What the hell was he doing at the Ryukyu agency? Starting today? Bullshit. Deku didn't fit in that world. The nerd couldn't even throw a punch last he checked, yet here he was, getting patted on the head and defended by a girl who treated pros like they were the ones in the way. But another thought followed, quieter and way more irritating. He noticed the eyes. Through the haze of suffocation and rage, Katsuki remembered it now. Deku shouting. Pointing. Nejire-chan had blasted the villain just enough for Katsuki to catch one desperate lungful of air. It. He slammed a palm into the side of the ambulance. The metal groaned under the strike, the ring of it echoing his frustration. Hey kid. Death Arm's voice cut in, hovering nearby. You okay? Katsuki gave him a look that could have set off Nitro. Get lost. I don't want your pity. He vaulted off the back of the ambulance, ignoring the sharp sting in his lungs. The pros muttered and backed off, clearly deciding he wasn't worth the headache. They went back to milling about, preening for reporters as if they had actually done something. I don't need their praise anyway. But no matter how hard he tried to shake it, the image of Deku with Nejire-chan stuck. They looked natural, like they belonged together in the air, leaving everyone else on the pavement. Katsuki's teeth ground together. A spark popped in his palm, unbidden. Why does he get noticed? Since when does Deku get someone bubbly chick to fight his battles for him? Am I jealous? Hell no. This pisses me off. With a scoff, he stalked toward the police line, ignoring the reporters barking his name. He needed to get the hell out of here before he exploded something for real. Let the nerd think he's climbing the ranks. I'm still going to UA and he isn't. I'll make sure Deku regrets ever thinking he could keep up. Nejire adjusted her flight to a smoother, low-altitude glide to conserve what was left of her vitality. The wind carried away the last echoes of the cheering crowd, leaving them in a pocket of quiet as they touched down on a deserted residential side street. She didn't let go of his wrist until his feet were firmly on the pavement. The silence between them was awkward as Izuku looked at the scuffs on his red sneakers, his heart racing against his ribs. He got ready for the real scolding to start. Nejire turned around and got face to face with Izuku, too close to him for comfort, close enough for him to see the faint glow still fading from her eyes. She tilted her head and looked at him with a look that shifted from protective fire to soft, quiet thought. Suddenly, she poked him hard in the forehead. You were absolutely crazy back there, you know that? Izuku winced, his face heating up instantly. I know. I'm sorry, Nejire. I know I scared you, and I didn't mean to. No, seriously. Crazy, Nejire repeated. Her tone was light, but her brows were drawn together in genuine concern. If I hadn't been there, you would be a green pancake right now. Ryukyu is probably going to yell at me, and your mom is definitely going to kill both of us for letting you almost die on day one. Izuku kept his head low, his throat tightening. I'm sorry. I really am. I couldn't watch. Not when I knew I could help. Nejire sighed, her cheeks puffing out like a frustrated squirrel. That's the part that makes me mad and proud at the same time. He blinked, looking up in surprise. Proud. Nejire raised a finger, her expression turning serious. Your brain saved the day, Izuku. If you hadn't told me to aim for the eyes, my waves might have just splashed the villain around and hurt Bakugo. You gave me a target. Because of you, he's alive. Izuku's eyes widened, shimmering with a mix of shock and relief. Really? You actually think so? I don't think so. I know so. She placed a hand on his shoulder and gave it a firm, grounding squeeze. You were amazing. Then her voice dropped to a stern whisper. But promise me you'll be careful. You aren't alone anymore. You've got a whole agency backing you up. Don't go trying to be a solo act yet. She finished with a playful wink that sent a fresh wave of red to Izuku's ears. It wasn't the hollow praise the pros gave Kaken, nor the blind condemnation they'd thrown at him. It was an honest assessment. She saw his flaw, but she also saw his value. Thank you, Nejire, he whispered. Don't mention it. She tried to spin playfully in the air, hair whirling behind her, but only gave a weak flutter before she landed back on her heels with a slight stumble. Whoops. Out of gas. Now, let's get to the agency. Ryukyu's going to want to hear how her newest intern caused a massive scene before he even signed his paperwork. Izuku paled, his stomach somersaulting. Oh, don't worry. She'll be proud of you too, Nejire chirped, pulling out her phone. Probably. He was not reassured. Nejire dialed a number on her cell. Hey, Aquawoman. It's Nejire-chan. I'm a little tapped out. I don't think I can fly back carrying Izuku. Can you send Swift and Brock to pick us up? We're a few blocks north of the Tatooine shopping district. She stopped to listen to the answer. Awesome. We'll wait right here. Oh, and make sure they bring that bag of mochi from the break room. I'm starving. About 20 minutes after Nejire's call, the Ryukyu agency's personal vehicle, a sleek, grayish-white van emblazoned with the Jaguar logo, pulled to the curb. Its engine purred with the low, contented hum of a well-maintained beast. The side door slid open, revealing two men who looked like they'd stepped out of two very different worlds. One had skin made of jagged, tectonic gray stone, wearing a blue and white striped leotard that gave him the look of a professional weightlifter. Beside him was a leopard heteromorph with rockstar aesthetic piercings, a tattered leather jacket, and a permanent expression of boredom. Nejire waved enthusiastically. Hey Brock. Hey Swift. Aquawoman said you were running on empty. The stone man Brock rumbled in a voice that sounded like grinding gravel. He held up a bag of mochi. I brought the snacks. And I whipped up some green tea smoothies for the road. You're a lifesaver. Nejire beamed. Come on, Izuku. As Nejire hopped in, the leopard man Swift extended a clawed hand to block the door. He leaned down, his feline nose twitching as he sniffed the air. His tail flicked irritably behind him. Who's the stray? Swift asked, his eyes narrowing. Did someone lose their kid brother or something? Nope. Nejire puffed out her chest, looking proud. This is Izuku Midoriya. He's the new analyst Ryukyu's hiring. He's super smart. He's the new brain to our brawn. He's already figured out Ryukyu's shoulder issue. The two heroes turned their gaze to Izuku. It wasn't a warm look, it was the heavy, professional skepticism of veterans looking at a new recruit who hadn't seen action yet. They saw the nervous stance, the big yellow backpack, and the plain middle school uniform that screamed, not qualified. He smells like fabric softener and fear, Swift said honestly, raising an eyebrow. He looked Izuku up and down with slow, deliberate judgment. When Ryukyu said he was young, I was expecting a work-study student from UA. This isn't a playground, kid. People get hurt badly in this line of work. Don't get in our way. Izuku flinched, his fingers tightening around the straps of his bag. I won't. I promise. I'll stay in the office. I won't be a burden. Be nice, Swift. Nejire scolded, puffing out her cheeks in a pout. Or I'll tell Ryukyu you haven't filed your reports from Tuesday because you were too busy playing mobile games in the break room. Swift went pale beneath his spotted fur, his tail going stiff. Just get in the DM van. Nejire took Izuku's hand and pulled him into the plush interior. Swift climbed into the driver's seat, muttering something about snitches. Don't mind him, Nejire whispered as they settled into the supple leather seats. He's grumpy because he fell into a trap last week and his paw is still sore. He's actually a total softie. He spends half his paycheck feeding the stray cats behind the agency. It's okay, Izuku murmured, clicking his seatbelt into place. The luxury of the van felt alien to him, a cocoon of safety he didn't feel he deserved. He's right. I'm not like you guys. A thought like lead weighed in his stomach. Do they know I'm quirkless? Should I tell them now or wait until they see me fail? Well, I for one am always happy to meet a new face, Brock said. He handed Izuku a cold smoothie and a piece of mochi with a hand that could crush a boulder. Yet, his touch was incredibly gentle, and he then gave the rest of the bag to Nejire, who was already slurping down her smoothie. Oh, thank you, Mr. Brock, Izuku said, bowing his head slightly. Brock is the hero name. Call me Gizagiza Shindo if you like, the stone man said with a small, rocky smile. He pointed toward the driver. And the grumpy cat is Jinsuke Hyo. Yeah, just read out our resumes for the whole world to hear, Swift snarked, throwing the van into gear. He pulled out into traffic, heading toward the heart of the city where the Dragoon Heroes Agency awaited. The van paused at a red light that felt 10 times longer than it actually was. To fill the silence, Nejire launched into a story about a patrol mishap from her early days at the agency. So, this guy had an ice quirk, right? He turned the whole street into a skating rink and was literally figure skating away from us. I used my waves to shatter the ice carefully, obviously giving him little room to run, but then he starts chucking snowballs at me. Snowballs? Izuku asked, his brow furrowing in confusion. That's what I said. And just as I'm dodging, a flock of pigeons comes out of and then poof. Feathers everywhere. Oh no. I didn't hit them. I was so busy trying not to hit them that the guy almost got away. But fortunately, Ryukyu caught up with him. He surrendered right away because he's obviously not stupid enough to fight a dragon, and she made the arrest. When I asked how I did, she just shook her head. I had feathers stuck in my hair and my costume. She told me I was efficient and energetic as always. Nejire mimicked her mentor's stern voice. But I could tell she was dying to laugh. Izuku chuckled softly. I feel bad for the birds, but it sounds like you handled it well. I try. Nejire chirped. Her eyes then fell on the yellow backpack in his lap. Hey, have you started anything new in your notebooks? Well, yes. He brought it with him, figuring he'd need to fill the pages today. The first entry is, it's you, just based on news clips. Now I'm curious. Can I see? Izuku's face flushed. It's not finished, it's mostly just sketches and... Nejire laid a warm hand over his, her expression softening. It's okay. I want to see how you see me. Izuku took a shaky breath. Why? Sure. He fished out hero analysis for the future number 14 and handed it over. Nejire flipped to the page. Nejire-chan quirk, wave motion. Her eyes scanned the blocks of text in silence. Then her lips parted in a smile of surprise. Izuku. This part about the 38-second limit on my spirals. Yeah. Me, Ryukyu, my teachers. We've been trying to figure out why my output drops during long fights for months. We thought it was hydration or blood sugar. She leaned in close, her hair brushing his shoulder. You figured it out with geometry? It's just a working theory, Izuku mumbled, rubbing the back of his neck. The video quality was grainy, so I had to guess the frame rate of your rotations. If I had better footage, I could give you a more precise interval of when the wave interference starts to cancel out your own momentum. I'm testing this in the training room today, Nejire said, her voice full of genuine wonder. Then her grin turned mischievous. Also, I saw your extra notes. She must be referring to my personal notes. Oh God, I feel like I'm going to die of embarrassment. You think I'm limitless? Oh, she's referring to those extra notes I made after she and Ryukyu left the apartment yesterday, not the personal ones. Izuku stammered, his heart skipping a beat. I mean objectively this. If the vectors are managed and we account for your caloric intake, your power ceiling could be like All Might's. You think I could be as strong as All Might? Maybe even stronger, Izuku whispered. He immediately clamped his hands over his mouth, his eyes wide. Did I really say that out loud? Nejire didn't laugh. Instead, she hugged the notebook to her chest, a radiant smile spreading across her face. You're so cool, Izuku. Me? Yes, you. She booped his nose playfully. Though, I do have one tiny critique. She pointed to his memory sketch of her in costume, specifically the chest area. You drew my melons a bit big. The van seemed to plummet into a vacuum of silence. Izuku's face turned a shade of red that shouldn't be biologically possible. I am so sorry. I was sketching from memory, and the perspective was. Hey, it's fine. I know you're not a pervert. It's a common mistake. But if you want to be accurate for the next drawing, my actual cup size is. Too much information, Hado. Swift thankfully roared from the driver's seat. Also, we're here. Get out. Swift and Brock exited the van, and Izuku followed, his legs feeling like jelly. As he stepped onto the sidewalk, he caught his reflection in the pristine glass of the Ryukyu Agency's building. Beside the polished heroes, he looked like a smudge on a masterpiece, a glitch in a high-definition broadcast. Hey, Izuku whispered, looking at his clothes. Is there somewhere I can change inside? I don't want to meet Ms. Ryukyu looking like this. Nejire texted me last night to wear something comfortable, yet respectable. I'll show you the locker rooms, kid, Brock assured him, his rocky hand giving Izuku a gentle pat on the shoulder. Don't sweat it. You'll do fine. Izuku stared at his reflection in the changing room mirror and tried smoothing down a stray lock of green hair that refused to stay in place, feeling like an actor wearing a costume for a play he hadn't rehearsed. He had swapped his school uniform for dark trousers that were slightly too long, bunching clumsily at his ankles. His mother had starched his white button-down to a stiffness that felt like it could stop a low-caliber bullet, and the collar itched at his neck with every breath. But it was his feet that truly betrayed him. His signature red high-tops, scuffed from years of dodging bullies and worn down at the heels, glared back at him against the sterile, polished floor. They were civilian shoes. Walking shoes. Running away shoes. He felt his chest tighten. I can't do this. I'm just a middle schooler. I'm quirkless. I'm Deku. They're going to realize it was a mistake the moment I open my mouth. They'll see right through the starch and the tuck and send me home with a participation sticker and a pity juice box. He clutched the hem of his shirt until his knuckles turned bone white. The instinct to bolt to disappear back into his anonymous life warred violently with his desperate need to belong. He turned on his heel, the rubber of his soles squeaking on the tile, ready to flee to the safety of the train station and his anonymous existence. Hey, are you okay in there, Izuku? Nejire's voice cut through the fog of his panic. You've been in there for 15 minutes. Are you stuck? Izuku jumped, nearly knocking over a trash can. I was just checking the mirror. Doing some mental preparation. That's good. Mental prep is key, Nejire chirped from the other side of the door. I do it before big raids. I picture myself winning, then eating mochi, then winning again. But come on. Ryukyu is waiting, and she hates waiting almost as much as she hates decaf coffee. I'm coming. Izuku shoved his old uniform into his locker, took one last shaky breath, and stepped out. Nejire was leaning against the wall, but she straightened up the moment she saw him. Ready for the grand tour? Izuku nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. Why? Nervous. Nejire's eyes softened, and she placed her hand on his shoulder. That's okay. Remember, you're here because you're amazing. Come on. And don't worry, everyone's super friendly. Well, mostly. They took a golden-doored elevator to the top floor. The hallway was quiet, smelling of expensive floor wax and old paper. When they entered Ryukyu's office, the dragon hero was buried behind a mountain of reports. She looked up, the sharp intensity of her gaze softening into a small, welcoming smile. Midoriya. Good to see you. Izuku immediately doubled over in a deep bow. Ms. Ryukyu. I am so sorry for being late on my first day. I know you told me not to be, but there was this villain and… You're not in trouble, she interrupted gently. I've already seen the news. I understand exactly why you were delayed. The media works fast, huh? Nejire whispered, leaning toward Izuku. Izuku looked up, hopeful. So… But Ryukyu's expression turned serious. However, I've already received calls from the HPSC following the incident. They were responding to complaints from the pros on the scene regarding the unauthorized interference of my staff and a civilian. Are you in trouble because of us? Nejire asked, her playful energy vanishing. Whatever issues the commission has with how I run my agency are between them and me, Ryukyu said firmly, standing up from her desk. I will not drag either of you into political squabbles. She stepped around the desk, stopping in front of Izuku. But there is something you must understand, Midoriya. Izuku swallowed hard, feeling very small. Sacrificing oneself to save others is the soul of heroics, Ryukyu said, her voice echoing in the large office. But there is a stark difference between selflessness and foolishness. Your approach today was extremely reckless. I'm not telling you this to discourage your heart, I'm telling you because I want you to be more decisive. If you're going to act, you must have a plan that doesn't rely on luck. Yes, ma'am, Izuku nodded, his voice cracking slightly. I understand. I'll do better. Ryukyu's warmth returned, and she placed a hand on his shoulder. I know you will. Come with me now. Before I show you where you'll be working, I have a lot to show you about my agency. Izuku was actually surprised by how huge the agency was. Ryukyu walked with a graceful stride, moving through the building as if it were an extension of her body. Izuku was already familiar with the lounge and cafe from his last visit, where various sidekicks were on break, inhaling hearty ramen bowls or towering parfaits. Ryukyu showed him a room where sidekicks were filling out paperwork and managing other necessities to keep the agency afloat. She also showed him the agency's medical wing for agency members, as well as civilians and heroes who require immediate medical attention, which hummed with the sterile beep of monitors. Finally, they descended 3 sublevels from the heart of the building. The elevator opened into a cavernous, reinforced concrete bunker designed to withstand everything from high-yield explosions to the might of a dragon. It was filled with all kinds of equipment to train one's body and quirk. The air here was different, echoing with grunts and impacts as sidekicks worked out or sparred with each other. I know an underground gym seems like overkill, Ryukyu began, her voice echoing off the impact-absorbing tiles. But it is for good reason. No, it makes total sense, Izuku interrupted, his eyes scanning the reinforced pillars. With how unpredictable and powerful quirks can be, a surface-level gym would be a liability to the city and its people. You need a bunker to contain the shockwaves. This guy gets it. A boisterous voice rang out. Izuku jumped, spinning around. Who? He froze. Just a face was sticking out of the solid concrete wall to his left. It had beady blue eyes and a cartoonish, cheerful smile. Ah? Izuku let out a strangled yelp, stumbling backwards so fast he nearly tackled Nejire. She caught him by the shoulders, laughing. Hey, Mirio, you nearly gave the poor guy a heart attack, Nejire scolded. However, she sounded more amused than angry, as if this was completely normal. Sorry about that. The face beamed. Suddenly, the rest of the young man's body phased through the wall as if the concrete were made of water. He was tall and built like a tank, wearing a hero costume that screamed, classic era, complete with a bold 1 million stamped across his chest. Before Izuku could process the physics of what he'd just seen, his hand was seized and shaken with enough vigor to rattle his teeth. Mirio Togata. I'm one of Nejire's classmates from UA. It's really nice to meet ya, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku's brain short-circuited. Why you know my name? Well yeah. Nejire hasn't stopped talking since yesterday about the genius analyst who's starting today. Izuku made a sound that could only be described as a teapot whistle. Ryukyu turned a knowing look toward Nejire. So, the entire second-year class knows by now, I assume? Nejire rubbed the back of her head, giggling sheepishly. Just my friends, I swear. Mirio. A soft, trembling voice drifted from behind a nearby squat rack. A dark-haired teen in a massive white cloak peeked out, looking like a startled hermit crab. Don't you think you're being a bit much? Togata immediately let go of Izuku, hands raised. Right? Sorry. It's just not every day you meet someone that Nejire is this hyped about. Especially when that someone is a middle schooler interning at a top 10 agency. The shy teen crept forward, staring intensely at the floor. I'm Tamaki Amajiki. Not good with new people, but I hope you like it here. Nejire cooed. Tamaki is so adorable when he tries to socialize. Amajiki immediately retreated into his high collar, his face aflame as he huddled into his coat collar, as if trying to fold himself into the fabric. Izuku watched him, stunned. I never would have guessed a hero in training could be as shy as I am. It's nice to meet you both, Togata and Amajiki. Togata? Izuku started, his analytical mind kicking in a frantic, buzzing curiosity as his voice got faster. Your quirk, the way you went through the wall, you looked like you were completely intangible. Does it work on a molecular level? Are you shifting your density? Or maybe it's a matter of vibrating your atoms to pass through solid matter. And what about your senses? If light and sound waves pass through you, you must be effectively blind and deaf while phased, right? How do you maintain your momentum without being able to see where you're going? The barrage of questions hit Togata, rapid fire. He blinked, then let out a booming laugh. Whoa! Slow down there, Midoriya. You're sharp. Yeah, my quirk is called permeation. It lets me make any part of my body or all of it intangible so that I can slip through walls, floors, even people or attacks. And you're spot on. When I'm fully phased, I can't see, hear, or even breathe. It's like falling into a void. I had to train for years to learn how to pop out of the floor without getting stuck or launched into space. Mirio's the best at it, Amajiki whispered, still looking at the floor, half hiding. He's like a ghost that hits like a truck. Nejire bounced on her toes, clapping her hands. See? I told you guys Izuku's a total quirk nerd. Hey, Izuku, you should show them one of your notebooks later. Ryukyu cleared her throat, crossing her arms. As much as I enjoy the networking, I assume you two are here for more than just scaring my intern? Togata's posture snapped into a professional salute. Yes, ma'am. Sir Night Eye wanted your eyes on a specific report regarding the investigation his agency is conducting. I passed it to Aquawoman. Sir Night Eye? As in All Might's former sidekick? And Fat Gum. Amajiki added. Sent me to ask about a joint patrol. There's been a spike in activity in the red light district. Nothing too big, but still concerning. I also left his report with Aquawoman. I'll review Sir Night Eye's report and Fat Gum's request once I've finished the tour, Ryukyu said. The two of you should return to your respective agencies. Yes, ma'am. Togata turned back to Izuku with a thumb up. Good luck, Midoriya. I have a feeling you're going to shake things up around here. Amajiki gave a tiny, almost invisible wave. Good luck. Surviving Nejire. It's harder than it looks. As they headed for the elevator, Izuku stood there, dazed. Thank you. It means a lot. He said it louder than he meant, drawing the attention of some of the sidekicks mid-workout. He didn't have time to feel embarrassed as they continued the tour. Izuku had just met Nejire's friends, sidekicks from other agencies, and they didn't look at him like a useless Deku. They looked at him like a colleague they couldn't wait to work with. Izuku got off the elevator onto the third floor, which Ryukyu dubbed the bullpen, a hive that appeared to look more like a stock market than a hero office. Sidekicks ran by with tablets in hand, barking into headsets about patrol routes and containment protocols. But they were mindful not to get in Ms. Ryukyu's way, giving her room to escort Izuku out of instinctual respect. There was a stench of old coffee in the air. There were maps of different cities and wards in Japan on one wall. On the other wall, TV monitors showed live traffic, weather, and news from all the major networks. There were desks piled high with paperwork next to evidence bags waiting to be handed off to the police, and trash cans were full of plastic bottles, foam cups, and half-eaten meals. It was a place where heroes worked. It was not as clean as Izuku imagined. Yet, he felt like a glitch in the complicated machinery. He hunched his shoulders, trying to hide behind Nejire, but she was a human spotlight, drawing every eye in the room. Izuku almost got distracted and bumped into one heroine, a ninja in a purple bodysuit with gray hair that he didn't even hear coming. Sorry about that, Izuku apologized, but didn't know if she heard him as she kept moving on. Don't mind her, Nejire said. Lady Ghostblade doesn't talk much. It's part of her whole mysterious vibe. This is where you'll be working, Ryukyu said, leading him to a corner workstation equipped with 3 high-definition monitors that showed real-time data, a specialized ergonomic chair, and a noise-canceling headset. Take your time getting a feel for everything. Then, when you're ready, start looking over the patrol logs and patterns of villain activity and quirk matchups. Izuku bowed so deeply that his forehead nearly hit the desk. Thank you, Ms. Ryukyu. I won't let you down. She nodded, her eyes assessing. I know you won't. If you need me, use the corded phone. It's a direct line. She pointed at an old-looking phone with a cord on the right-hand side of Izuku's desk. I didn't know they still made phones like those. Ma'am, we have a problem, Swift said as he jogged over with a tablet. Shatterpoint is moving again. Ryukyu's mood changed right away. Her warmth was gone, and in its place was the cold, sharp focus of a top 10 hero. Are you sure? Definitely. Swift gave her the tablet. Who's Shatterpoint? Izuku asked, his interest piqued, momentarily overriding his nervousness. A thief, Ryukyu explained. He has a quirk that allows him to fire compressed air bullets from his fingertips, strong enough to pierce reinforced glass and dent steel. He's been hitting jewelry stores and high-end electronics shops for 3 weeks. She handed Izuku a tablet, which he took with care. Here's footage of his last 5 robberies. He's fast, he's efficient, and he leaves no tracks. My patrols have missed him by minutes every single time. Swift and others think he has a getaway driver with a cloaking quirk, but there are never tire tracks at the scene. What do you think it could be? Izuku asked. That's what I need you to find out, Midoriya. Ryukyu looked Izuku in the eye, her gaze searching for the brilliant mind Nejire had promised. I need fresh eyes to watch the footage and tell us what we're missing. Izuku looked at the device. The weight of it felt like a mountain. This was it. This was the test. If he failed here, he went back to being Deku, the useless boy who dreamed too big. He sat in the expensive chair which made his small frame look even smaller and felt Nejire pull up a seat beside him, watching him with expectant, trusting eyes. Focus. Break it down. Forget the room. Forget the starch in your collar. Just look at the pixels. He pulled on the headset. The silence was absolute, just white noise. Izuku's world narrowed to the screens. He played the footage. Grainy security feeds showed a masked figure in tactical gear and a heavy trench coat Shatterpoint bursting into a shop. Air distorted. Reinforced glass shattered inward like ice. The figure vaulted the counter, stuffed jewels into a duffel bag with practiced efficiency, and ran out. 45 seconds. Izuku played the second video, this time at an electronics store. The lock on the security cage exploded under the air blast pressure, and Shatterpoint grabbed what he could and ran. 52 seconds. He played it again. Half speed. Quarter speed. He zoomed in until the image blurred into a mosaic of gray and black. Posture is consistent. He always slings his bag over his right shoulder to keep his left arm free. Possibly favors the left hand. The recoil from the air bullets suggests a PSI of at least 3,000, which is similar to that of a high-caliber pistol. But the timing? Why the pause? Izuku watched the third video, which was another electronics store, and zoomed in on the villain's hands, enhancing the image quality until the pixels blurred. Fire. Fuzz. Shatterpoint's hand shakes. Fire. Izuku pulled up the fourth robbery, a jewelry store. Fire. Long pause. Shatterpoint grabs his wrist. Grimace is visible even through the mask. Fire. Izuku put the tablet down and brought up a map on his monitors, typing in all the locations that were hit, his eyes darting across the 3 screens as he connected dots that only he could see, tracing an imaginary line between the robbery locations. He hits targets that are exactly 4 blocks apart. He's not moving fast between targets because of someone else or their quirk. He's moving fast because he knows the route perfectly. He might be using a skateboard or a bike, something silent and gravity-assisted to conserve energy. But his own quirk. There's a biological limit. Attacks on the body. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he pulled up an anatomical diagram of the human hand and forearm, overlaying it with the physics of compressed air recoil. Ms. Ryukyu! Izuku yelled, not remembering that the headphones were on and forgetting that they were still next to him. He tore them off, and his face turned red. Sorry, but I can see it. You found something? Ryukyu leaned over his shoulder and asked. He's hurting himself, Izuku said, pointing to a frame where the villain flinched. Check the fingers every third shot. Not only is compressed air coming out, but it's also building up in his joints before release. It's a barometric spike. If he fires more than 3 times, the pressure backwashes into his nervous system. It's causing temporary paralysis and extreme pain. Izuku looked up. His green eyes were no longer trembling, they were burning with the intensity of a strategist. He has a hard cooldown of 6 seconds after a volley. He's not fast because of a getaway driver, he's fast because he has to be before his arm gives out. Izuku pulled up a city map. He's targeting glass fronts. Because they take fewer shots. He's moving east, away from the police. The next target that fits his profile is a store with a glass front, expensive goods, and an easy way out. Gemini Jewelers on 4th Street. Izuku's grin was small and sharp, but it has a heavy steel shutter that comes down at night. If he tries to blast through steel, he'll have to use at least 2 full volleys, Izuku continued. He'll overheat his nerves. He'll be helpless for 10 seconds, paralyzed by the pain. That's your window. You got all that from some hands shaking? Swift scoffed, his tail lashing. Maybe he just has a cramp, kid. We aren't staking out a shop on a middle schooler's hunch. It's not a cramp, Izuku said, standing up. His voice was firm, cutting through Swift's skepticism. It's a microfracture tell. I've seen it in pro heroes with impact quirks like death arms. He will stop after the 5th shot. I'm certain. The bullpen went quiet. Even the sidekicks at the nearby desks looked over. Ryukyu looked at the map, then back at Izuku to gauge how sure he was of himself and his theory. She saw the boy who had run into the sludge on the news, and the analyst who saw the world in vectors. Swift, Ryukyu commanded. Take Brock. Go to Gemini Jewelers. Tell the owner to reinforce the shutters and set up a stakeout. Don't let anyone see you. Wait for Shatterpoint to show up. Don't move until he stops firing. Wait for the flinch. Swift looked like he wanted to argue, but the Dragoon hero's gaze was absolute. Yes, ma'am. Hey, what about me? Nejire asked, pouting. You're on recharge, Nejire, Ryukyu reminded her. Besides, this is a stealth operation. You're not exactly quiet. Nejire slumped in her chair, a playful pout on her lips that Izuku couldn't help but find adorable. He sat back down, his heart racing. He had just called a play for a top 10 agency. Now, all he could do was wait to see if he was right. The air over 4th Street was cool, accompanied by the rhythmic hum of Tokyo's nighttime traffic. Jinsaku crouched on the edge of a fire escape 2 stories up, his tail flicking with restless agitation as he overlooked Gemini Jewelers. His feline eyes scanned the empty pavement below. This is a waste of time, Jinsaku whispered into his comms. He kept his voice low, a subvocal growl meant only for Shindo's ears. 2 hours of nothing, Brock. We're sitting here because a middle schooler played Connect the Dots on a monitor. Ryukyu gave the order, Swift. Shindo's voice came back from the shadows of a dumpster below. We're staying put. She thinks the kid's theory is right on the money. She's putting too much trust in a fanboy, Jinsaku said with a sneer, flexing his claws against the cold metal grating. My gut tells me that Shatterpoint is hitting a target 3 districts away while we... Shush, Shindo said. Movement. 3 o'clock. Jinsaku went still, his ears swiveling forward. There were no footsteps. No engine. Just the faint, rhythmic clacking of wheels on asphalt. A figure emerged from the gloom, coasting on a skateboard with practiced ease. He wore the tactical trench coat and mask from the footage. Jinsaku felt a jolt of adrenaline spike through his chest. Well, I'll be d'med. Shatterpoint slowed to a halt in front of the jewelers. He checked the street left, then right, his movements sharp and arrogant. Seeing no patrols, he stepped off his board and approached the steel shutter. The villain cracked his neck, his splayed fingers twitching. Crack! The sound was like a balloon bursting in the narrow street. An invisible bullet of compressed air slammed into the shutter. The steel warped instantly, a fist-sized crater appearing in the metal. The sidekicks reinforced bracing earlier, and so far, it has held firm. Shatterpoint tilted his head, seemingly annoyed. He raised his hand again. Crack, puff, puff. 2 more massive dents appeared, the steel screeching as the rivets were strained to their limit. He's getting frustrated, Shindo whispered. Shatterpoint growled, the sound muffled by his mask. He planted his feet, leaning into his right arm for a final, brute force barrage. Crack, puff, 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 puff. The air pressure in the alley dropped noticeably with every shot. The shutter was being hammered into scrap metal, sparks flying as the locking mechanism began to tear. Shatterpoint raised his hand for one last blast that would surely rip it open. Crack, puff, ack. It happened exactly on the 5th shot. Shatterpoint's arm jerked violently back as if he'd been struck by lightning. He let out a strangled cry of agony, his knees buckling. The compressed air had backfired into his own joints. He collapsed, clutching his right wrist with his left hand, his entire body shaking with tremors. The flinch. Now! Jinsaku roared. He launched himself off the fire escape, a blur of yellow and black. He didn't just fall, he pounced, twisting in midair to drive his boots into the villain's chest. The impact sent Shatterpoint skidding across the asphalt, his mask flying off. Get me! Shatterpoint wheezed, his left hand twitching as he tried to aim a desperate shot. Not a chance! Shindo shouted, charging out of the alley like a landslide. Crack, puff. The villain fired a weak, frantic air bullet, but it merely dusted the grime off Shindo's rocky chest. The stone hero reached down, hoisted the villain off the ground by his collar, and slammed him against the brick wall. Don't try it, Shindo rumbled, his stone face inches from the thief's. You're done. Jinsaku was already slapping the cuffs on the villain's wrists. As he tightened them, he caught a glimpse of Shatterpoint's right arm. It was swollen, the veins bulging and purple, twitching. My arm. It feels like it's on fire, the villain bemoaned, tears streaming down his face. I can't feel my fingers. Jinsaku stared at the injury. Radial nerve injury. Barometric pressure buildup. The kid hadn't been guessing. Jinsaku stood up, dusting off his knees, his tail swishing thoughtfully. He looked at Shindo, who was wearing a massive, rocky smirk. Don't say it, Jinsaku grumbled, tapping his earpiece. What? Shindo teased. That the fanboy just saved us 3 weeks of chasing a ghost? Just shut up. Jinsaku connected the line to the bullpen. This is Swift. Shatterpoint is secured. Repeat, target is secure. Minor property damage, no injuries. He looked down at the groaning villain, then let out a long, heavy sigh. Tell the new analyst he was right. Down to the second. The suspect's arm is toast just like he predicted. Jinsaku looked up at the moon, shaking his head. Scary little nerd, he muttered. There was no venom left in his voice, only a grudging, genuine respect. Izuku's leg bounced with the frantic rhythm of a jackhammer. Every minute of silence from the comms felt like an hour, allowing doubt to creep in, insidious and cold. What if I'm wrong? What if he doesn't show? What if he has a support item I missed? What if someone gets hurt because I was so eager to be a hero? Nejire was doodling on a notepad next to him and humming a light, airy tune. She looked completely calm, but every few minutes she would lean over and nudge his shoulder with hers, giving him a small, reassuring smile. Confirmed. Aquawoman's voice rang out through the bullpen. Swift and Brock have successfully apprehended Shatterpoint. He requires immediate medical attention for a self-inflicted nerve injury. The bullpen erupted with surprised whistles and low murmurs of approval as once skeptical sidekicks were now glancing toward the corner desk with newfound curiosity. Tell Swift and Brock to return to the agency, Ryukyu commanded, her voice steady but carrying a hint of pride. Get a medical team on standby for the suspect's arrival. Yes, ma'am. Aquawoman nodded and hurried toward the medbay. Ryukyu turned toward Izuku. He instinctively tried to shrink into his chair, overwhelmed by the sudden weight of dozens of gazes, his face burning. But he stopped when he saw Ryukyu holding 2 steaming cups of tea. Midoriya. Izuku scrambled to his feet. You just saved my team weeks of wasted resources, prevented a robbery, And stopped a villain before he could escalate his violence, she said, handing him one of the cups. Excellent work. Before he could stammer out a thank you, Nejire threw her arms around his neck from behind, nearly sending his tea flying. She rested her chin on top of his messy green curls, beaming at the room. I told you he was a genius. Oh, I wish I could have seen Swift's face. He probably looked so confused. He owes you an apology, Izuku. And a smoothie. A big one. No, make it two. Izuku felt the heat rush to his face, turning his ears beet red. But for the first time in his life, the heat wasn't born of shame. It was a warm, golden glow of pride. He hadn't thrown a single punch. He hadn't used a quirk. He hadn't broken a single bone in his body. But he had won. I helped, he whispered to himself, a genuine, teary smile finally breaking through his lingering anxiety. I actually helped. First day survived, Ryukyu said softly, watching him over the rim of her own cup. How do you feel, Midoriya? Izuku took a sip of the tea, letting the warmth settle in his trembling hands. He looked around the bullpen at the high-tech monitors, the busy sidekicks, and the blue-haired girl still hanging off his shoulder. I feel, he started, his voice finding its strength, like I finally belong somewhere. Ryukyu's expression softened, a motherly warmth in her eyes. You do. And the agency is lucky to have you. Izuku felt a tightness in his throat as a silent promise formed in his chest. I'll make you proud, Ms. Ryukyu. I'll show everyone that even if I'm not out there fighting, I can make a difference. I'll help make this agency the best in the world.